Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. I was driving back from a job site late, probably around 11:30 at night. We'd been up in the hills near Ellensburg, checking on a telecom tower, and I stayed longer than I should have. I was tired, but the drive usually calms me down. Just long, empty stretches of highway and barely any traffic that late. The first time I noticed the car was maybe 20 minutes outside town. It was a two-lane road, no lights except for the occasional reflector post. I looked in the rear view and saw headlights way behind me, maybe half a mile back. Nothing weird about that. I kept driving. After a while, I glanced back again, and the headlights were still there. Closer now. Still not unusual. I figured they were going faster and would probably pass me soon, but they didn't. I slowed down a little to let them go around. They stayed the exact same distance behind me. Not tailgating, not backing off, just holding steady. Too steady. After 10 minutes of that, it started to bother me. I changed lanes once and dipped the speed down again. No reaction. They stayed right behind me, headlights always the same brightness, never shifting. I thought maybe it was someone from work heading the same direction. I even tried flashing my hazard lights, just to see if they'd react. Nothing. No honk, no flash, no movement. I passed a rest stop and pulled in, thinking I'd let them go ahead. I parked near the vending machines and waited with the engine running. A minute went by. No car. 2 minutes. Still nothing. I got out and looked down the highway both ways. The road was empty. No headlights, no sound, just quiet wind and that dull buzz from the lights above the restrooms. I figured maybe they turned off at one of the small roads I hadn't noticed. It bugged me a little, but I let it go. I got back in and pulled out again, heading west. About 15 minutes later, I checked the mirror and saw the same headlights again. Same color, same brightness, same distance. It was like they'd never left. I kept driving, trying not to fixate on it. The road curved a little through some hills, and a few times I thought they were gone, like I'd lost them behind a bend. Then they'd show up again, always the same spot behind me. At one point, I even thought, what if the lights aren't from a car? But that didn't make sense. They looked exactly like normal headlights. Low to the ground, steady, white with that slight yellow tint, older halogens have. I turned on the radio just to break the silence. Static. I flipped through stations and got nothing. I remembered there was a dead zone out there, so I didn't think much of it. A little after midnight, I passed a small sign for an old logging road. No name, just a number. I wasn't familiar with it, but I remembered seeing it on maps once. Not really a place people went. The headlights were still behind me. I was getting fed up. I figured I'd pull off again and let this weirdo pass. I slowed down and turned onto the logging road. Gravel crunched under the tires as I pulled a little ways in and turned off the lights. I wanted to sit in the dark and see them drive by, but no one drove by. I waited, engine idling, staring through the side mirror. The highway stayed empty. A few minutes passed, still no lights. That's when I noticed the pulsing. At first, I thought it was my eyes adjusting, but there was a faint light deeper in the woods, off to the right, maybe 30 or 40 feet in. It wasn't bright, more like the glow from a phone screen through a blanket. It pulsed slowly, faint, then a bit brighter, then dim again. It didn't blink like a flashlight or strobe. It had this slow, steady rhythm, almost like breathing. I rolled down the window and listened. Nothing. No insects, no wind. Just that weird pressure in my ears like when you're deep underwater. The light kept pulsing. I couldn't see what it was coming from. No shape, no object. Just this hovering glow among the trees. Pale blue. Cold looking. I sat there longer than I probably should have, just watching it. I didn't feel scared exactly, more confused, disoriented. Eventually, the light started to move. Not fast, not jerky. It just floated sideways, weaving between the trees like it was following a path. It stayed level, never rising or dropping, and didn't cast shadows or light up the ground. It just kind of slid through the dark. Then it vanished, not flicked off, just faded out as it moved behind a thicker patch of trees. I waited there for a while, trying to figure out what the hell I'd just seen. I got out and stood by the car, listening. Still nothing. Even the bugs were silent. I don't know why, but I called out, just a quiet hello, not yelling. I don't think I expected an answer, but something about the silence after felt wrong, like the whole place had swallowed the sound. I got back in the car and pulled out of the logging road, back onto the highway. No headlights behind me now. I kept checking the mirror every minute or so. Still nothing. It was like whoever had been following me just stopped existing. I drove another 40 minutes until I hit the outskirts of town. I passed a few gas stations, finally started picking up radio again. It felt almost normal, like the weirdness had stayed behind with the forest. When I got home, I checked the time, 1:47 a.m. I tried to tell myself it was just a car that turned off without me noticing, that the light was a drone or some gear left by surveyors. But I've seen drones, they don't move like that, and no one surveys out there at night. I looked at the car the next morning to see if maybe someone had messed with it, left a mark or anything. Nothing. Just road dust. I haven't seen the lights since, but every time I drive that stretch of highway at night, I watch the mirror a little more than I used to, just in case. I went camping alone last September, just for one night. I needed to clear my head, and the weather was supposed to be decent. Not too cold yet, not a lot of people around. I picked a spot I'd been to once before, about 4 miles into the national forest, just a little off the main trail near a small stream. It wasn't a designated campsite or anything, just flat and quiet and surrounded by trees. No cell service out there, which was part of the appeal. I hiked in late afternoon and got there maybe an hour before sunset. Nothing unusual about the trip in. I passed one couple heading out, but that was it. Once I got to the clearing, I dropped my pack, set up the tent, and gathered some wood for a fire. Nothing fancy, just twigs and some logs that looked dry enough. I had a little folding saw with me, but most of what I used was already on the ground. By the time I got the fire going, it was dark. I had a headlamp on, but mostly sat with it off and watched the fire. Ate a cold sandwich, drank some water, then set up my sleeping bag inside the tent and pulled a couple things out. My jacket, headlamp, a paperback, and my knife, which I usually keep close when I'm out by myself. I remember clearly that I left my bag leaned against a log near the fire, not zipped or anything. My cook set and tarp were still spread out on the other side, kind of where I'd tossed them. I'm not super tidy when I camp alone. I had my boots off near the tent flap and a pair of socks draped over a branch to dry out, just a normal little mess. I didn't stay up that late. The fire burned down and I crawled into the tent around 10, maybe a little later. I remember checking my watch. I read for a few minutes with the headlamp on, then shut it off and laid back. The forest was quiet, not silent, but that low rustling sound you get from trees shifting and little night insects buzzing. I didn't hear anything weird. I was out cold in less than 10 minutes. I woke up while it was still dark. No idea what time it was. I didn't hear a sound or have a dream or anything. I just opened my eyes and felt off. Not panicked. Not even alert at first. Just unsettled. Like when you forget what day it is and something's not lining up. I laid there listening. The fire had burned out. No breeze. No movement. The quiet felt heavier than before, like I was wearing earplugs. I turned my head toward the tent flap, and I swear it looked brighter outside than it should have. Not moonlight. More like the kind of pale gray you get maybe 10 minutes before dawn. But it wasn't that time yet. I hadn't slept long enough. I sat up and unzipped the flap, still inside my sleeping bag. The sky was overcast, no stars, and that weird gray glow was coming from somewhere off to the right, behind the trees. I didn't see a source, just a faint uniform light like someone had put up a giant lantern behind the forest. I stayed like that for a few minutes, just staring. I don't know why I didn't get up. I didn't even think to grab my knife. I just sat there with the flap open, squinting through the trees, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did. The light didn't move. It didn't get brighter or dimmer. Eventually, I laid back down, fully clothed, with the zipper only halfway shut. I told myself it was probably headlights from a Forest Service truck or something bouncing off low clouds. It didn't make sense, but I needed to sleep. When I woke up again, the light was gone. Sunlight was coming through the tent. Real sunlight this time. It was around 7 a.m., I think. My first thought was that I must have dreamed the whole thing. But then I stepped out. All my gear was packed. My boots were sitting side by side just outside the flap, socks folded neatly on top. My pack was standing upright by the fire pit, fully zipped with the tarp and cook set inside. My knife was tucked into the side pouch where I always keep it when I'm hiking. My jacket was rolled and strapped to the bottom. Everything was in the exact place it would be if I'd packed it myself, but I hadn't. The fire pit was cold, but clean. The ash had been brushed into a little pile. Even the twigs and wrappers from the sandwich were gone. The log I'd leaned the bag against was bare. The spot looked like no one had even stayed there. I walked the whole perimeter, just in case. No tracks, no prints, no signs that anything had been through. The ground was damp from dew, but not muddy. If someone had been there, I should have seen something. A broken twig, a footprint, anything. But there was nothing. I checked my pack again. Nothing missing, nothing added, no rips or scratches. My food was still sealed. Even the water bottle had the same amount left. It was like someone had just tidied up, tucked everything away the way I would have done it myself. The tent was still standing, but when I looked closer, I saw the stakes had been pulled and laid in a little bundle next to it. The corners of the tent were folded inward, ready to roll up. I don't know how long I stood there staring. It was quiet again, just birds and the wind. The forest looked the same, familiar even, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd missed something, like I'd blinked and someone had come and gone without making a sound. I packed the tent the rest of the way and left. The whole hike back, I didn't see a single person. No voices, no distant footsteps, just my own breathing and the crunch of the trail. I didn't even stop for water. I just wanted to be out of there. Back at the car, everything felt normal again. I looked over my shoulder more than once on the drive out, but there was nothing behind me. No vehicles, no signs. When I got home, I dumped my pack out onto the floor. Every piece of gear was there, nothing missing. But when I picked up my book, the one I'd been reading the night before, I noticed something. The bookmark had moved. Not far, just 2 pages ahead. It happened when I was 16, walking home from a friend's place on a Friday night. He lived maybe 20 minutes from me, a straight shot down a quiet road through our neighborhood. It wasn't late, just past 11, and I'd made the walk a dozen times before. It wasn't the kind of town where anything really happened. The weather was normal, not cold yet, just jacket weather. No wind, just dead calm. That's what I noticed first, how still everything felt. Like the air had weight to it. I remember looking up and not seeing a single branch move on the trees. Even the bugs were quiet. No crickets, which was weird for that time of year. I didn't think much of it, just figured the temperature had dropped enough to shut them up. I had my hands in my jacket pockets, hoodie up, walking along under the streetlights. They were the old orange kind that hum a little when you're close to them. There's about a dozen on that stretch, lights spaced out evenly. I was maybe a third of the way home when I heard it, or felt it. Hard to explain. It was this low vibration, not loud, not even really a sound at first. More like pressure in my chest, like standing next to a big speaker when it's on, but not playing music. I thought maybe it was a truck coming down the road, so I glanced behind me. Nothing. No headlights, no engine, no wind. Just that same, still road stretching back the way I came. But while I was looking, the streetlight I just passed flicked off. No buzzing, no flicker, just click, dark. I stopped walking, turned to face it, kind of confused. I waited to see if it would come back on, thinking maybe it was on a motion sensor or timer, but it stayed dead. The next one behind it was still lit. I turned around again and kept walking. After a few steps, I felt that pressure in my chest again, just a bit stronger. And then I noticed the hum, not from the lights, not electrical. It was softer than that and deeper. It didn't come from a direction I could point to. It felt like it came from under the road, or maybe above me. I stopped again, but it didn't stop with me. Then the light behind me, the one I'd passed after the first, turned off. That's when I got this weird feeling. Not fear exactly, but like I was being watched, not from a window or a house, from somewhere farther off. Like something way bigger was paying attention. I looked around again, still nothing. The neighborhood was dead quiet. No cars, no dogs, no porch lights turning on. And it hit me that I hadn't seen a single car since I left my friends. Usually there'd be at least one. This was a well-traveled road, even that late, but nothing. No one. I picked up my pace a little, not running, just walking faster. The humming got stronger the farther I went, but only in this weird way where I could feel it more than I could hear it, like it lived in my bones. And another light went out behind me. I spun around again. That made 3, all in a row. The rest were still on. But the pattern was obvious now. Every time I passed one, it would wait maybe 30 seconds, then cut out. I didn't hear clicks or see any sparks. Just darkness. I tried to tell myself it was faulty wiring, that maybe a fuse was blowing out section by section. But the timing was too clean, too precise, like something was waiting for me to be past them. I kept walking. The houses on either side of the road started to thin out, just a few scattered here and there. Big yards, some trees. I knew there was a small field coming up on the right, and the idea of walking past that in the dark was making my stomach knot up. The hum kept growing. It was like being under power lines, but denser. I could feel it in my legs now, in my teeth. And still, no cars, not even the sound of one far off. I passed another streetlight, counted in my head, got to about 30. Click. Darkness behind me, one step closer. That's when I started jogging. Not full-on running, but fast enough to feel it. I didn't want to turn around again. I just wanted to get to the next corner where the main road intersected. There were gas stations there, traffic lights. I figured if I could make it that far, I'd feel normal again. But the humming didn't let up. It kept pressing in, not loud, just there. Like it was waiting for something. It wasn't until I passed the second to last light before the intersection that I finally looked up. I didn't see anything at first, just the empty sky. Stars, a faint bit of moonlight. But then I noticed that one patch didn't look quite right. It wasn't black like the rest of the sky. It was off, like a smudge or a shape just slightly darker than the rest. Oval, maybe. No lights, no movement, just hanging there. I froze. My foot caught a crack in the sidewalk and I stumbled a bit but didn't fall. I looked away, then looked back, and it was still there. Not moving, not blinking. And then the last light, the one directly ahead of me, flicked off. I turned and ran. The field to my right felt wide and open and wrong. Like if I looked at it too long, something would be there. I focused on the sidewalk in front of me, on the faint glow of the stoplight at the corner. The hum was so strong by then that I couldn't think straight. It wasn't a sound anymore, it was a presence. Like being underwater, but not wet. My legs felt heavy, my fingers were tingling. I made it to the corner. The gas station lights were still on, fluorescent and cold. No one was inside, but the pumps were lit. The stoplight changed from red to green, even though there were no cars. And just like that, the hum stopped. No fade out. No echo. Just gone. I looked back down the street. All the lights were still out. I could just barely make out the outline of the road, the shape of the houses. Whatever had been in the sky wasn't there anymore. I walked the rest of the way home fast, keeping close to the houses and under the porch lights. When I got inside, I locked the door, went straight to my room, and didn't sleep until the sun came up. The next day, the lights were working again. All of them. I walked that road in the afternoon just to check. No burnt bulbs, no city trucks. Everything looked normal. But the quiet was still there. Not the same silence as that night, just an absence. Like nothing wanted to be loud anymore. I still walk sometimes, but I never take that street after dark now. I cut through side roads, even if it takes longer. I don't know what it was. I don't want to know. All I know is it noticed me and it followed. We were driving back from my sister's house in Nevada, cutting through a bunch of back roads near the Utah border. It was around 1 a.m. by the time we hit that long, empty stretch outside of Parowan. No other cars, no towns for miles. The sky out there is unbelievable. No light pollution at all. Just pitch black with a ridiculous number of stars. My girlfriend Dana had been staring out the window quietly for a while, and she asked if we could pull over to stargaze for a bit. We had nowhere to be the next morning, so I said, sure. We found a little pull-off next to a wide field. I think it was just ranch land, totally flat, fenced off with barbed wire, but nothing around. I shut off the engine, and we got out, leaning against the hood of the car. There was no sound except a little wind. Dana pointed out a few constellations. I don't know much about that stuff, but I liked watching her get excited about it. About 10 minutes in, I noticed this one light that didn't look like the others. At first, I figured it was a plane because it was moving slowly, kind of drifting in a slight arc, but it didn't have blinking lights like most aircraft do. Just this steady, soft, white glow. Not really bright, not like a spotlight or anything, just clean. Dana saw it too. We both just kind of kept watching it. It dipped lower spot, heading toward the far side of the field across the road. It wasn't moving like something falling. No speed increase or wobble, just this super smooth descent, like it was being lowered on a wire. It got lower and lower until it was almost touching the ground. Then it just stopped. We stood there waiting for something else to happen. I think I expected it to rise back up or take off sideways or something, but it didn't. The light dimmed a little, pulsing once or twice, and then it just went out. Gone. Not like it zipped away, just disappeared as if someone turned it off. We stayed frozen for maybe a full minute before Dana whispered, "What was that?" I didn't know what to say. I couldn't think of anything that made sense. After a little back and forth, we decided to check it out. The road was dead, not a single car for over half an hour, so we crossed it and climbed through a sagging part of the fence. The field was really flat and dry, mostly low grass and packed dirt. No crops, no animals. The spot we aimed for was maybe 200 yards out. As we got closer, we started noticing that the air felt warmer. Not hot, but noticeably different than it had been by the road. And the ground, I swear the dirt under our shoes started to feel softer, like it had been loosened up or disturbed somehow. When we reached the spot where we thought the light had touched down, there was nothing. No scorch marks, no flattened grass, no debris. The only weird thing was that the dirt was warm to the touch. I knelt down and pressed my palm flat on it, and it felt like someone had left a heat pad under the surface. But there weren't any tire tracks, footprints, nothing like that. It was like the light had hovered right above the ground without ever touching it. Dana bent down beside me and whispered, "Do you hear that?" I held my breath and listened. There was this faint, high-pitched sound, almost too high to hear. Not quite a ringing, but a tone. No source for it. No wind, no bugs, nothing else. Just that noise, sitting in the air like static. We stood there for a while, trying to figure out if there was a logical explanation. We walked around the area in widening circles, looking for anything. A drone, a light post, wires, even a buried power line, but there was nothing. Just dry earth and short grass. Then Dana stopped walking and said, "Where's our car?" I spun around, and I could still see the car across the road, but it looked farther than I remembered, like way farther. We hadn't walked that long, maybe 10 minutes total. But it was a speck now, barely visible in the moonlight. I didn't understand how it had gotten so far. We started heading back, walking fast, but trying not to freak each other out. The strange thing was, no matter how fast we walked, the car didn't seem to get closer for the first few minutes. I kept checking behind us, and I swear the field behind us looked different. Like the horizon line had changed. It didn't feel like we were walking in a straight line anymore, even though we were following our footprints. Eventually, after maybe 20 minutes, the car started to look closer again. But when we reached the road and stepped through the fence, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A dead rabbit lying just off the shoulder. No blood, no signs of injury, just stretched out on its side like it had dropped mid-run. Its eyes were open, and there was dirt on its fur, like it had fallen out of the sky. I didn't say anything about it. I just unlocked the car, and Dana got in without a word. We sat there for a while before I started the engine. As soon as the headlights came on, the tone, that high-pitched sound, vanished, like someone hit a mute button. We drove the rest of the way in silence. Neither of us felt tired anymore. I checked the clock on the dash when we got back on the main road. We'd been out there for nearly an hour and a half. I know we didn't walk that far. We didn't talk about it again for a couple weeks. When I brought it up, Dana just said she didn't want to think about it. And I couldn't blame her. Every time I replayed it in my head, it got harder to line up with anything normal. There's still no part of it that really makes sense. It was the second morning of our trip, just after dawn. Me and Nate had gotten to the ridge around 5:30 before the sun really started to show. It was cold but not miserable, maybe mid-30s, and the woods were still damp from the frost overnight. We were hunting elk, but we hadn't seen much the day before, so we moved a little farther east toward the open timber. We weren't talking much, just walking slow, keeping an eye on the ground, looking for fresh sign. I remember the light filtering through the branches, that gray-blue color before it turns golden. I was about 20 feet behind Nate when I saw him stop suddenly. He held his hand out without turning, real slow, palm down. That was our usual signal to freeze. I stopped and looked past him, and about 30 yards out in a patch of brush just off a narrow trail was a deer. A doe. Nothing special about it, not the animal we were after, obviously, but something was weird right away. It was just standing there, one leg raised like it had paused mid-step. Not twitching, not flicking its ears, totally still. Its head was tilted slightly up, not looking at us, looking above us. Nate stayed frozen, and I didn't move either. We watched it for maybe 10 seconds, maybe more. It didn't blink. It didn't twitch, just stared straight up. Then I looked up too. At first I didn't see anything. The sky was mostly clear, a few wisps of cloud catching early sunlight. But right above the tree line, a little ways past where the deer was looking, there was this shape. It wasn't lit up or glowing or anything like that. It was just black, perfectly black. And not shaped like a bird or a plane or even a drone. It was more like a wedge, not sharp, not pointed, just this black triangle floating up there. Still, no movement, no sound, and it was low enough that if it had made noise, we would have heard it. No wind, no leaves rustling, just dead quiet. I remember thinking maybe it was some weird shadow or a weird cloud formation, but it didn't move. It didn't match anything I'd ever seen. It wasn't blending in either. It actually blocked the stars behind it. Like, if you looked at the patch of sky just to the left or right, you could see the stars clearly. But where this thing was, it was just void. I looked back at the deer. Still frozen. Same raised hoof. Still staring upward. Nate turned his head slightly and whispered, "You see that?" I nodded, but I don't think he saw me. Neither of us moved for a while. I started to notice this weird pressure in my ears, like altitude pressure, but we weren't anywhere near high enough for that. It didn't hurt, just felt like being underwater. It made me swallow a few times. Then the deer finally moved, all at once. It jerked its head back down, looked around like it'd just woken up, and bolted into the brush without even giving us a glance. That broke the moment somehow. Nate turned and gave me a look, like, "What the hell?" I looked back up. The shape was still there, but I think it had rotated slightly, like not spinning, just a very slow pivot, like the edge of it was turning away. Still no sound. We stood there for another minute, maybe two, long enough for the light to change a little. Then it just wasn't there anymore. I didn't see it move. I didn't see it shrink or fade. I blinked and it was just gone. The stars behind it were back. We stayed out a few more hours that morning, but we didn't see anything. No elk, no deer, no birds. Even the squirrels were quiet. I remember Nate remarking how still everything felt, like the forest was holding its breath. Back at camp, we didn't really talk about it. We both kind of danced around it, like neither of us wanted to be the one to bring it up directly. I think we both were hoping it would seem less weird if we ignored it. That night, we heard something walking near the edge of camp. It wasn't close, but it was heavy enough to hear the crunch of twigs. Probably a moose, we told ourselves. We didn't go check. The next morning, we packed up early. We'd originally planned to stay through Sunday, but we both kind of mutually decided we'd seen enough. Nate just said, "Let's try a different area next time." On the drive out, maybe an hour after leaving camp, we saw another deer standing by the side of the road. Another doe. It was facing the tree line, not looking at us, not eating. Just standing there, head slightly up, same posture. We passed it slow, didn't stop. Nate didn't say anything until we were another mile down the road. He just said, "It looked the same." And yeah, it did. I was flying out of Salt Lake, heading southeast towards Santa Fe. It was just after 9 p.m., clear skies, no weather in the area. I'd done this route more times than I could count. Nothing complicated, just a standard cargo run. I was alone in a small twin prop, not pressurized, cruising at around 10,000 feet. The air was smooth, visibility good, nothing unusual. About 30 minutes in, I got a blip on the TCAS, traffic collision avoidance system. Just a small warning, traffic nearby, happens all the time. The display showed something at my altitude, about 10 miles out, closing slowly. No call from ATC about it, but sometimes they don't if it's not in conflict. I looked out to my 10 o'clock and there it was. At first, I thought it was just another plane. A steady white light, maybe a bit brighter than usual, but it wasn't moving fast, so I figured maybe a jet descending into a nearby airport. There's a couple of regional fields along that stretch. I watched it for a while. It wasn't on a collision course or anything, just holding a steady bearing. But the light started to look odd, hard to describe. It wasn't blinking like a typical navigation light, and it wasn't red or green. It stayed white for maybe a minute, then shifted to an orange tint, kind of like an ember. Not a sudden flash, more like it just faded from one color to another. I'd never seen lights behave like that. Not on anything in the air, anyway. I called into center and asked if they had traffic in my area. They came back a few seconds later saying negative. Nothing at my altitude within 20 miles. I told them I was seeing something visually, and they just said to maintain course and report any changes. They didn't sound concerned, but I didn't like that I had something on TCAS and in my line of sight, and they had nothing. It kept getting closer. Not fast, but steady. I'd say it got within 5 or 6 miles. That's when it started shifting again. Not just the light, but the shape, or at least the light's shape. It stretched out, horizontally at first, like a flare with a tail, but then it flattened like a bar. Then it turned blue, a deep, almost electric blue. There was no strobe, no red or green nav lights, no beacons. It just hovered there, holding position. And then, without warning, it accelerated. Straight up. It didn't tilt or bank. It just went from holding position to shooting directly upward, completely silent in less than a second. I didn't see it disappear. It just became a pinprick and was gone. I stared at the sky where it had been, then looked at my TCAS. The blip was gone, nothing but my own transponder showing. I keyed into center again and told them what I saw. They paused a while, then asked me to confirm altitude and heading. I gave it to them, and they said again, no traffic, no radar returns, no deviations in my area. The rest of the flight was quiet. I kept looking around, checking mirrors, watching the sky. My instruments stayed normal, no malfunctions, no weird readings. But I couldn't stop thinking about how quiet it had been. Even commercial jets make a rumble when they pass at a distance. This thing was close, big enough to show on collision avoidance, and not a sound, not even a Doppler trail. After landing in Santa Fe, I filed the incident like I was supposed to. They marked it as unconfirmed visual anomaly. Standard procedure when they don't have anything on radar or satellite. I've flown a lot since then. Never saw anything like that again. But every now and then, if I catch a strange glint out the side window, I still instinctively look for a shape that doesn't belong. I was working nights at the time, managing inventory at this small distribution center just outside of Billings. The shift ran from 6 p.m. to 4 a.m., and most of it was mindless, scanning barcodes, moving boxes, filling out logs. We were a skeleton crew overnight, maybe 6 of us on a full shift. Most nights were quiet. Sometimes you'd go a whole hour without hearing anyone else moving around. I smoked back then, usually 2 or 3 breaks a night. The building had one of those little concrete pads in the back, just past the loading dock, with a rusted-out ashtray stand and a flickering security light. The fence around the property butted up against a field, maybe 2 acres, all weeds and patchy grass, then just empty horizon. No buildings, no roads, nothing. It was peaceful in a boring kind of way. This happened around early October, I remember, because it was starting to get cold at night, and I'd finally started bringing a hoodie. It was maybe 2:30 in the morning, the slowest part of the shift. I stepped outside with my lighter and a Marlboro, and the air felt sharper than usual. That kind of crisp where the tip of your nose stings a little. There was no wind, and it was dead silent, except for the buzzing from the security light and the hum of the building behind me. I leaned against the railing and looked up. I always did that. It helped pass the time. You could see more stars than you'd think, even with the facility lights. I lit my smoke, took a drag, and then noticed this one light. It was brighter than the others. Not blinking, not twinkling. Just solid. Too bright to be a star, but too still to be a plane. It wasn't high enough either. Just a little above where you'd expect a small private aircraft, maybe. At first, I figured it was a helicopter, but there was no sound. None. Not even the distant thump you get when they're far out. And it wasn't moving at all. Not left or right. Not up or down. I watched it for a good minute, maybe two, waiting for it to drift or blink or do anything. It didn't. I turned to flick ash into the tray and glanced at the far corner of the fence. When I looked back up, I swear I didn't even move my feet. The light was gone. For half a second, I thought maybe I'd lost it in the clouds, but the sky was clear. Then I blinked, and there it was, directly overhead. It wasn't gradual. It didn't streak across the sky or fade in. 1 second it wasn't there, and the next, it was. Bright, close, dead center above me. I actually stumbled back a step and dropped my cigarette. The weirdest part was that it didn't cast a shadow. The light wasn't illuminating anything. Not the ground, not the railing, not me. It was just there, like a perfect circle of brightness hanging in place. I don't know how long I stared at it. I remember feeling like I should move or go back inside or call someone, but I didn't. My body didn't want to do anything. I wasn't frozen, just blank, like waiting to wake up or for someone else to react first. Then it blinked. Once. A slow pulse, not off and on, more like dimming and brightening. I reached into my hoodie pocket for my phone, more out of habit than anything. I wasn't even thinking clearly. But by the time I got it halfway out, the light disappeared. Not faded, gone. The sky looked normal again. Just stars, same as before. No sound, no smell, no weird pressure change, just still. I stood there for a minute trying to make sense of it. I was breathing fast, but not like panic. More like I'd sprinted upstairs without realizing it. I rubbed my eyes, looked around, waited to hear something, a voice, a radio crackle, anything. But the building was quiet. I thought about knocking on the back door, telling Dan, the forklift guy, what I'd seen, but I didn't. I didn't want to try putting it into words yet. I went back inside and finished the shift like normal. But the next night I noticed a few things were off. First was my lighter. I always kept the same Bic in my hoodie pocket, red, chipped, half empty. That night when I reached in, I pulled out a blue one. Same brand, same wear, but not mine. I figured I'd maybe grabbed someone else's by mistake, but I didn't smoke with anyone else on shift and nobody borrowed it the night before. I didn't say anything, just used it and moved on. Then I checked my locker later that night. I had this small keychain light in there, one of those tiny LED squeeze things I used when I dropped stuff behind shelves. I hadn't touched it in weeks. But when I opened the locker, it was on, just sitting there in the back corner glowing faintly. I picked it up and the button wasn't stuck. It turned off normally. It hadn't drained the battery either. Still worked for weeks after that. That's when I started to feel watched. Not constantly, not even in an obvious way. Just this low-level awareness, like someone was always a few seconds behind me, just out of frame. I'd glance over my shoulder, walking the loading aisles, and see nothing, but the feeling didn't go away. The smoke pad started to feel different, too. I still took my breaks there, but I never looked up. I couldn't. Every time I tried, I felt like my chest was tightening, like something would be there again if I dared to check. I started smoking faster, sometimes not even finishing, just enough to get my fix and get back inside. One night about a week later, I cracked and told Dan. He looked at me for a second like I was messing with him, then said, "Out here?" I nodded. He got quiet, said he hadn't seen anything, but sometimes got this weird pressure in his ears on brakes, like gaining altitude. I didn't push him on it. I just said, yeah, that's kind of what it felt like. Nothing else happened after that. Not really. I stopped smoking out back, started taking my breaks by the vending machines instead. The feeling of being watched faded after a couple months, or maybe I just got used to it. I switched to day shift the following spring. Sometimes I still look at the sky, usually when I'm walking to my car after work, but I don't linger. I don't stare at any one spot too long, and I never blink when I do. It happened last fall, sometime in mid-October. I don't remember the exact date, but it was cool enough at night that I had to wear a hoodie and the leaves were just starting to pile up on the sidewalk. I'd been out walking like I usually did after dinner, just a little loop around the block, maybe 10-15 minutes. It helps me clear my head. There's this small park about 4 streets over, nothing fancy, just a playground and a couple benches. I like to sit there for a bit before heading home. It's quiet at night. You can hear traffic from the highway if the wind's right, but mostly it's just insects and maybe a distant dog barking. That night, the sky was super clear. No clouds at all. One of those nights where you can see every little star. I don't know why I started filming. I guess I noticed this one star was kind of twitchy. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't glide like a plane or float like a drone. It would hold still for a few seconds, then jerk a little to the left, then nothing, then up a tiny bit. Not huge movements, but unnatural, like something trying to imitate a star and not doing a great job. I watched it for maybe 5 minutes before pulling out my phone. I held it up, zoomed in, and started recording. I even said something out loud, like this better not just be a satellite, which is embarrassing now, but I talk to myself when I'm alone. I remember holding the camera as still as I could, elbows tucked, watching the screen while also trying to keep the object in my line of sight. It kept moving. Little twitches, short bursts, sometimes zipping to the side and then stopping dead. I figured I was catching something weird. Maybe a glitchy drone. Something explainable, but still cool. I filmed for about a minute and a half. When I got home, I sat on the couch and opened the video. That's when it got strange. There was nothing there. The screen was black at first. I'd filmed the night sky, so that made sense. But the star I'd been recording wasn't visible at all. Not even a blur, just regular stars, clear and sharp, exactly where they were supposed to be. The object I'd spent 90 seconds tracking with my own eyes. Gone. And not just gone. The video had these weird skips in it, like little jumps, just half-second flickers of static. They didn't line up with the movements I remembered. They were totally random. One near the beginning, then maybe 10 seconds later another. And each time the static hit, there'd be a faint sound. Not a pop, but something low, like a hum, cut off quickly. I replayed it a bunch of times. I even checked my phone's lens, thinking maybe I'd smudged it or it had trouble focusing. But everything else was clear. The stars I didn't care about were pin sharp. Just the one thing I was actually filming had vanished. I thought maybe I was misremembering, that I'd moved the phone or the object had dipped behind a tree. So I went back outside, walked to the end of my driveway and stared at the sky. The object was still there, still twitching around, still not acting right. I took out my phone again and recorded another clip. About 30 seconds this time. Same result. The object didn't show up at all. Just a blank patch of sky where I knew it should have been, and more of that glitchy static. This time, when I paused the clip at the static frames, the whole screen was warped, like the compression had folded in on itself. You know how a damaged DVD used to look, with digital smearing and color blocks? Like that. It was only for a split second, but it was consistent. Always in the same shape, this horizontal streak across the middle, and always with that faint sound. I don't know how long I stood there, maybe 20 minutes. Long enough that my neighbor came out to get something from his truck and gave me a weird look. I didn't say anything to him. Eventually, I went back inside. I plugged my phone into my laptop to transfer the videos. I thought maybe something about the phone's screen was screwing with the playback, or that I'd see more detail on a bigger monitor. But it was the same. No sign of the object. No change in resolution. Just stars, the sound of crickets in the background, and those random patches of static. Around 1 a.m., I decided to try one more time. I walked back to the park. The air felt heavier than earlier, not stormy, just thick. Still no clouds, but the crickets had gone quiet. That's when I noticed something else. The object wasn't where I'd seen it before. It had shifted farther west, closer to the edge of the park where the trees started. I watched it for a few minutes before recording again. I filmed for about a minute, and this time I said the time out loud, just to anchor it. 1:07 a.m., object moving erratically west side, or something dumb like that. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I just wanted to keep track. I didn't zoom in this time, just kept it wide. Back home, I played it. Same thing. No object. just stars, just sky. But this time something different happened in the audio. At the 43-second mark, during one of the static glitches, I heard what sounded like a voice. Not clear words, more like a clipped syllable, as if someone was halfway through saying something when it got cut off. I replayed it over and over. It wasn't my voice. It wasn't me. I hadn't spoken during that section. I imported the audio into Audacity, boosted it. It didn't help much, but you could hear it, a small fragment of sound, not like any background noise I recognized. Too sharp, almost metallic. Definitely not an animal and not a car or wind or anything normal. That's when I stopped messing with it. I didn't try to film it again after that. I checked the sky a couple nights later and the object was gone. I kept the videos on my phone for a few weeks, then deleted them. I don't know why. I guess it started to bother me how nothing about them made sense. I've filmed the night sky before. Planes, meteors, satellites, they all show up. Even dim ones. The camera picks them up. But not this. I haven't told anyone I know. Not really. I brought it up once in passing to someone at work, said I'd seen something weird in the sky, and they made a joke about weather balloons. I dropped it. I still go on my walks, still sit at that bench sometimes, but I don't look up as much. And if I see something strange, I don't reach for my phone anymore. I just watch quietly and wait for it to move on. I was out skiing alone in early March, somewhere near the western edge of the Bridger Range in Montana. Not deep wilderness, but off-trail enough that I hadn't seen another person all day. I'd parked my truck at a pull-off around 9 a.m. and taken the skin trail about 2 miles up through some dense timber, then cut east into a less-used bowl I'd scoped out the week before. It was cold, mid-20s, and the snow had that dry, sugary texture that's great for skiing, but doesn't pack well, so I'd had to take my time climbing. Around 1 p.m., I started heading back toward a ridgeline I'd planned to follow down. I wasn't rushing, just cruising at an easy pace, trying to make the most of the daylight. That's when I saw something weird ahead of me, maybe 50 yards out, near a little shelf of trees. At first, I thought it was a rock outcropping, or maybe a bare patch where the wind had scoured the snow down to the dirt. But it wasn't that. As I got closer, I realized it was a clean, perfectly round patch of bare ground. No snow, no ice, not even frost. Just dry earth and some dead grass, like it was early spring in that one spot. It was maybe 12 feet across, almost a perfect circle. The snow around it was untouched. No boot prints, no animal tracks, not even any signs of melting along the edge. I stopped maybe 20 feet back and just looked at it. Something about it felt off, but I couldn't say why exactly. It wasn't just the shape, it was how clean it looked, like someone had vacuumed the snow away. The dirt wasn't wet or muddy either. It was dry and cracked in places. That made no sense. I figured maybe there was geothermal activity under there or something, a vent or gas leak, I don't know. I pulled out my phone to drop a pin so I could look it up later, but I couldn't get a GPS lock. The blue dot just spun in place like it didn't know where I was. My phone had full battery and I wasn't deep enough into the mountains to lose GPS like that. I opened a compass app just to check and it wouldn't orient. The needle just floated, drifting in slow circles no matter which way I turned. That's when I started to feel uneasy. I backed up a few steps and checked my phone again. Still nothing. No coordinates, no signal. I don't usually get service up there, but the GPS always works. Always. I use it to track my runs, measure elevation, all that. I stood there for another minute, just looking at that patch of ground. I can't really explain it, but it felt like the air was heavier there. Not warm, not cold, just thick. I wasn't hearing any wind in the trees anymore either. It was like everything went muffled, like when you close the windows in a car. My ears didn't pop or anything, but there was this pressure that built up in the back of my head, like I'd climbed too fast. Eventually I decided to get a little closer, just to see if there was a heat source or something. I took maybe 6 steps toward it, skis still on, trying to keep my balance on the crusty top layer. When I got about 10 feet away, I felt this weird vibration in my boots. Not strong, just a buzzing, like the kind you get standing near a transformer or a big piece of machinery. But there was nothing around me, just snow, trees, and this dead circle of ground. I crouched down near the edge and touched the dirt with my glove. It wasn't warm. It wasn't cold either. It felt neutral, like it had been sitting at room temperature somehow. That's when I heard this faint clicking sound. Very soft. I thought maybe it was ice falling from the trees, but it was rhythmic, too consistent for that. Click, click. Pause. Click, click. It sounded like it was coming from under the ground. I stood up and stepped back. As soon as I moved away, the pressure in my head let up a little. I pulled out my phone again. Still no GPS. I kept backing up, watching the circle the whole time. Nothing changed. No movement, no sound, just that weird patch of dirt in the middle of a snowy forest. I got maybe 100 feet away before the compass snapped back into place. Phone gave me a location again. Not far from where I thought I was. I looked back one more time. The clicking was gone. The hum in my boots stopped. Everything was just normal again. Birds in the trees, breeze in the branches, distant creaks of snow settling. I didn't go back. I cut a different path down the mountain and looped wide around that spot, just to be sure. Skied down without stopping. I kept checking my phone every few minutes on the way, and everything stayed normal. GPS worked fine, compass pointed true. Elevation readings made sense. Back at my truck, I took my gear off and tried to see if maybe there'd been some kind of announcement about seismic activity or military testing, but of course I didn't have service there either. Once I got back into town, I tried looking up geothermal maps of the area, power line maps, anything. Nothing came up that matched that spot. A few days later, I went back with a friend. I didn't tell him what I'd seen, just said I thought I'd found an early thaw and wanted to see if it was still there. It wasn't. We skied the same ridge, came to the same shelf of trees. The snow was untouched. No circle, no dirt, no dry ground. Just a smooth, unbroken blanket of snow like it had never been disturbed. I checked my GPS the whole time and never lost signal once. I kept waiting to feel that pressure again or hear the hum, but everything felt normal. Still, I didn't go all the way back to where the circle had been. Just stood off to the side and looked. My friend didn't notice anything weird. He thought I'd brought him there to check for animal tracks or something. I never told him what actually happened. I don't really tell anyone. What am I supposed to say? I go skiing alone less often now, and I don't take that route anymore. I've been messing around with amateur radio for a few years now, mostly just a hobby, listening in on random frequencies, sometimes picking up old school shortwave broadcasts or emergency channels. It's usually pretty boring, just static or random chatter. But one night last fall, something weird happened that I still can't wrap my head around. It started around 2 a.m. I was in my small basement radio room, surrounded by my gear, a couple of receivers, antennas, and a laptop running some decoding software. I often stay up late scanning different bands, hoping to catch something unusual. I wasn't expecting anything that night, honestly. I had the scanner tuned to a little used VHF band, just hopping around frequencies. Then I caught this signal that was odd. It was a series of pure tones, rhythmic and precise, nothing like a normal transmission. The tone would beep for about a second, then be silent, then beep again, then again, and this repeated exactly every 7 seconds, like clockwork. I checked the frequency display to make sure I wasn't imagining it. Yep, there it was, loud and clear. The tones were pure sine waves, clean and perfect, not some interference or a glitch in my equipment. I recorded it and watched the timer. The signal lasted exactly 13 minutes before disappearing just as abruptly as it had appeared. I figured I'd caught some weird experimental broadcast or a test transmission from some agency, maybe military or research. But when I tried to find any information on that frequency or any known signals matching that pattern, I found nothing. No records, no chatter about chatter, nothing. I went back and listened to the recording again, slowing it down, speeding it up, trying to find any hidden pattern or message. It just repeated the same tone over and over with that 7-second gap. No modulation, no Morse code, nothing. Just a steady beep, 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 perfectly timed. That was weird enough, but what happened next made things stranger. After the signal stopped, I felt a weird pressure in my head. It was subtle, but definitely there, like a dull ache behind my eyes. I checked the clock. The time was 2:13 a.m. I turned off my equipment, thinking I'd call it a night. But as I stood up and moved toward the stairs, I noticed a faint, flickering light outside my basement window. It wasn't my porch light or the street lamp. Those were steady and consistent. This light blinked in the distance, just past the tree line behind my house. It had a soft glow, almost bluish, and it appeared for maybe 5 seconds, then disappeared. Then reappeared again a couple minutes later, flickering in and out, always in the same spot. I grabbed my flashlight and went outside, trying to get a better look. The backyard was quiet, the air still except for the occasional rustle of leaves, but the light was gone. I scanned the horizon, even used binoculars, but nothing. I thought maybe it was a drone or some kind of aircraft, but there was no sound, no hum, no buzzing, nothing. And it didn't move like any plane or drone I've seen. It just blinked on and off. I went back inside, a little unnerved, but I told myself it was probably a reflection or some weird trick of the light. Maybe a passing car's headlights bouncing off something. I tried to get back to sleep, but I kept hearing this soft hum in my ears. Not loud, just barely there, like a background noise that wasn't actually there. I blamed the radio signal for messing with my brain, or maybe the caffeine I'd had earlier. The next day, I told a couple of friends who are also into amateur radio. They thought it might be some sort of satellite transmission or a test pattern from some obscure agency, but none of them had ever heard of anything like that exact 7-second repeating tone. One friend suggested it might be a beacon signal, but again, no known beacons match that timing or frequency. That night, I set up my gear again, hoping to catch the signal if it came back. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. The same rhythmic tone, perfectly timed every 7 seconds for exactly 13 minutes. I checked everything. No interference, no other signals around. It was clean. After it stopped, the light flickered again outside my window. Same place, same pattern. This time, I was ready. I grabbed my phone and went outside, trying to record it, but as soon as I got near the tree line, the light vanished. It felt like something was watching me. I don't know why, but standing there, looking into the dark, I felt exposed and weirdly small. That's when I noticed something else. My watch had stopped. The little digital display was blank, even though the battery was fine. I reset it, but it didn't turn back on until I got inside and turned the lights on and off a few times. It was like some kind of interference was screwing with electronics nearby. The next few nights, the same pattern repeated. The signal came on around 2 a.m., lasting 13 minutes, then the light flickered outside, always in the same spot. Each time I went outside, it disappeared before I could get a good look. My electronics acted strange. Clocks would freeze, radios would buzz with static, and sometimes my phone would lose signal for minutes, even though I was inside my house. It wasn't terrifying in the usual sense. No monsters, no glowing beings, no abductions. Just this slow, creeping feeling that something was there, just out of reach. Something watching or maybe trying to communicate, but not quite able to. I tried to make sense of it, but nothing fits. I even tried recording myself talking through the signal, thinking maybe a response would come, but no change. The tones kept coming, steady and perfect. After about a week, the signal stopped altogether. No more tones, no more flickering lights, and my electronics started behaving normally again. I thought it was over, but sometimes, late at night, when the house is quiet, I still hear a faint beeping in my ears. It's just barely there, like a ghost of that signal. I check my radio sometimes, but nothing shows up anymore. I don't know what it was. A military test? Some weird atmospheric effect? Something else? All I know is that for those nights, something was out there. Sending that pulse, blinking that light, messing with my gear, and whatever it wasn't normal. I was flying my drone late one night, just messing around like I usually do after work. I work as a drone operator for a local surveying company, so I get to handle this kind of equipment every day. But most nights, it's just routine stuff. Check the feed, map out the area, log the GPS data, nothing out of the ordinary. That night, though, something strange showed up on my screen, and I'm still trying to figure out what the hell it was. I had the drone hovering over this stretch of empty farmland outside town. It was quiet, no wind, perfect conditions. I was running a low-light camera feed, watching for any wildlife or trespassers. mostly because sometimes farmers get worried about people sneaking onto their property. I was about 20 minutes into the flight when I noticed something odd on the monitor. At first, it looked like a reflection or some kind of lens flare. This faint, shimmering ball of light, maybe 6 feet in diameter, just hanging there in the dark. It wasn't like any aircraft I'd seen before, no blinking lights or steady glow, just a smooth, shimmering sphere, sort of like a soap bubble, but glowing softly. It hovered maybe 50 feet off the ground. I thought maybe it was a drone from someone else, but it didn't have any of the usual blinking LEDs. And it wasn't broadcasting any signal, at least nothing my radio gear could pick up. Then, it moved, and that's when everything got weird. The sphere zipped across the feed so fast it almost disappeared. It didn't accelerate or decelerate like any flying object I know. It just instantly changed direction, like it teleported from one spot to another. 1 second it was to the left, the next it was on the right, and then it shot straight up into the sky, all without any blur or motion trail. My heart rate jumped. I tried to keep the drone steady and zoom in, but the camera's digital zoom just made the image grainier. The sphere seemed to pulse faintly, like it was shimmering, almost vibrating. I kept watching, thinking it had to be some trick of the light or interference with the camera sensor. Maybe an insect or a reflection from a nearby tower's blinking light, but it moved too quickly and unpredictably for that. And I was pretty sure the camera lens was clean. The weirdest part? The drone's GPS log didn't record any of the sphere's movements. The drone itself was holding position perfectly, but the feed showed this glowing sphere zipping around. If you looked at the GPS tracking, the sphere wasn't anywhere. It was like the feed was showing something outside the actual location data. I replayed the footage a few times. The sphere stayed on screen for about 5 minutes, moving around the field in these crazy patterns. No noise came through the drone's mic, just the usual background hum. Then it vanished just as suddenly as it appeared, disappearing with no trace, like someone turned off a light. After that, I landed the drone fast. My hands were shaking. I checked the equipment, the GPS logs, and all the camera settings. Nothing was wrong. The drone's battery and sensors were fine. No glitches or errors. I told a few friends who work in drone tech and surveillance. Some said it might have been a software glitch or some kind of weird reflection, but none of them could explain the sphere's movement or why it didn't appear on GPS at all. A couple of days later, I took the drone out again to the same spot. I was hoping to catch whatever it was again, or at least see if it was some kind of natural phenomenon. I got there around 10 p.m. The sky was clear, stars visible, and I started flying. Nothing unusual showed up, but about an hour in, I caught something else. This time, I heard a faint buzzing noise in my headphones, like interference, but different, almost rhythmic. Then, for a brief second, the feed distorted. When the image cleared, the sphere was back. Same shimmering glow, same size, but this time it hovered closer to the drone, maybe 30 feet away. It stayed there for maybe 20 seconds, pulsating softly, then zipped away again with that impossible instant direction change. I tried following it, but the feed glitched again and then went black for a few seconds before returning to normal. When I landed the drone, I noticed my phone's screen was flickering. The GPS app I was running alongside the drone's feed had lost my location signal for a few minutes during the flight, exactly when the sphere showed up. I don't know if it was related or just coincidence, but it freaked me out. After that night, I stopped flying around that area for a while. I wasn't sure if something was watching or messing with the tech. It didn't feel hostile, just wrong. Weeks later, I checked the footage again, frame by frame, trying to find some clue. In some frames, the sphere looked almost like a ripple in the air, a distortion, like light bending or something. I tried matching it with satellite passes or military flight paths, but nothing lined up. I even drove out there during the day to look for anything unusual on the ground. No strange markings, no equipment, no tracks, just empty farmland and some cattle. The weirdest thing is that after those 2 nights, nothing came back. No signals, no buzzing, no spheres. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined the whole thing, but then I watch the footage again. It's there, that shimmer, that impossible movement. I don't know what it was or why it was there. Maybe it was just a trick of the sensors or some drone experiment or something else. But whatever it was, It was real enough for me to know something strange is out there, watching, moving in ways that don't make sense. We were out on the lake late that night, just me and Jake, like we did most weekends when we wanted to get away from everything. It was one of those quiet, still nights where water looks like glass and the stars are so bright they almost feel close enough to reach. We had the little motorboat anchored a good distance from shore, lines in the water, just waiting for a bite. Nothing big planned, just fishing and talking, maybe catching some bass or catfish. The night was cold, but not freezing. I had a jacket on, Jake too. We sat on the back bench, each with a rod in hand. The only sound was the occasional plop when a bobber moved or a fish took a nibble. The boat creaked softly in the water, and the gentle ripple from our movements spread out around us. After a while, Jake went quiet, just staring out over the water behind the boat. I looked too, thinking maybe he saw something, maybe a bird or a fish jumping. Then we both heard it, a splash. It was sudden and heavy, like something big hitting the water hard right behind us. But here's the thing, there was no ripple, nothing spread out on the surface, just silence except for that weird splash noise. It was like the water had made the sound without moving. That didn't make sense. I looked over my shoulder and scanned the dark water. No wake, no movement. The surface was still perfectly smooth. Jake said, "Did you hear that?" I nodded, feeling a little uneasy. We both stayed still, waiting, expecting maybe to see something break the water. Then came this low droning sound, coming from beneath the boat. It wasn't like any engine noise or the usual hum of insects or the wind. It was deep and steady, almost like a vibration you could feel through your bones. It didn't get louder or softer, just stayed there, this constant low buzz under the water. I asked Jake if he heard it. He nodded again, eyes wide now. We didn't say much after that, both just listening. The droning went on for several minutes. It didn't seem to be coming from any direction. It was just under us. I looked back toward shore, but it was too dark to see much beyond the tree line. The moon had slipped behind clouds, so the lake looked endless and black. The only light came from the little flashlight Jake had on the side of the boat. I shone it over the water, trying to catch any movement, but nothing showed up. After maybe 5 minutes, the droning stopped suddenly. No fade out, no gradual decrease, just cut off. The silence felt even heavier afterward. I told Jake to pull up the lines and start heading back. Neither of us said why, but I think we both wanted to get out of there. As Jake fired up the motor, the water around the boat stayed unnervingly still. No wakes, no splashes from the propeller, nothing. Usually, even the smallest movement would stir something up, but the lake just sat there, like it was holding its breath. We headed back slowly, neither of us talking much. The boat's motor was the only sound, but the water didn't respond as I expected. It didn't ripple or splash against the hull. I was watching the water more than the path ahead, trying to make sense of the quiet. At one point, Jake asked if I felt anything strange, like a presence or being watched. I said yeah, but it was hard to explain. It wasn't fear exactly, more like something was out there in the water or just below the surface. Something that didn't want us to notice it, but also didn't want to be ignored. About halfway back to shore, the boat's GPS screen flickered and went blank for a few seconds. That's when I really started to feel uneasy. It came back on with no problem, but the little glitch made the whole situation feel even more off. We made it to the dock without incident, and when I stepped onto the wooden planks, the familiar creak of the boards felt like a relief. The night air seemed less heavy there, and the lake looked normal again, reflecting the moonlight and stars without any weird silence or strange noises. Jake and I packed up quietly, neither of us eager to talk about what had happened. On the way home, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see some light or shape following us, but there was nothing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing that splash in my head and the low drone vibrating under the boat like it was still there waiting. I haven't been back out to that part of the lake since. Not sure if I'll go again anytime soon. I was working the late shift on a slow stretch of highway. one of those long, empty roads that cuts through nothing but fields and forest. It was the kind of night where the radio was mostly static, and the only thing breaking the silence was the occasional car passing by. Around 2 a.m., I was driving my patrol car northbound, the streets deserted, except for me and a few stray headlights in the distance. The air was cold, and there was a thin fog hanging low over the ground. Visibility wasn't great, but not bad enough to slow me down much. I was scrolling through the radio frequencies when I noticed something strange up ahead on the shoulder. A car was sitting there, engine running, door wide open. The headlights were on, but no one was inside or around it. I slowed down, switching on my patrol lights to get a better look and to signal the driver if they were nearby. As I pulled up alongside the car, I saw the keys still in the ignition, the driver's seat empty, and no sign of anyone close by. The door swinging slightly in the breeze, but no footprints or tire tracks besides the ones that looked like they'd been there a while. I radioed in the situation to dispatch. Unit 12 to dispatch, I've got an unoccupied vehicle idling on the shoulder at mile marker 67, door open, keys in ignition. No driver in sight. They told me they'd send a tow truck and a backup, but it would take some time. I stepped out of my car, flashlight in hand, scanning the area. It was quiet, too quiet. I looked around the trees, the brush, and the road behind me. Nothing. No sounds except the faint hum of the engine and the distant wind rustling the leaves. I glanced at the car's interior. It looked normal. No signs of a struggle, no papers or belongings left behind, except a phone on the passenger seat, screen off. I picked it up and saw there were no notifications or missed calls. Odd, but not necessarily alarming. I tried to unlock the door fully to get inside and maybe check for any clues, but as I reached for the handle, the engine suddenly cut out. The car went silent, headlights dimmed, and the interior went dark. I blinked and felt a sudden drop in temperature. I glanced back at my patrol car, and for a moment, I thought I saw something flicker near the edge of the tree line, like a shadow shifting. But when I turned my flashlight toward it, there was nothing there. I pulled out my radio again and tried calling dispatch, but the channel was static. No response, no crackle, nothing. I switched frequencies, but every channel was the same. The silence on the radio made the air feel heavier. I took a step back toward my patrol car, and that's when I noticed something on my dashboard camera. The little red light was blinking, indicating it was recording. I had forgotten to turn it off before leaving my vehicle. I pulled out my phone to check the footage, but the screen said no signal when I tried to connect to the camera's Wi-Fi. Strange. I gave up on that and went back to the car on the shoulder, deciding I'd sit inside and wait for backup. Maybe whoever left the car had wandered off nearby, or maybe they'd come back. I opened the door and climbed into the driver's seat, closing the door behind me. The interior smelled faintly of gasoline and something else, hard to place, like a faint metallic scent mixed with the cold night air. I pulled out my radio again and tried one more time. Nothing. Then, about 5 minutes in, I noticed the headlights outside the window flickering rapidly, like a strobe, but when I looked up, nothing was there. No other cars on the road, no flashes from passing vehicles, just my own patrol car's lights and the dark night. I thought maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me from staring at the dark for too long. I blinked and looked away, but then the flickering started again. This time it felt sharper, almost like it was coming from outside the car, maybe down the road a little. I opened the door a crack to look out and saw the headlights of a car far in the distance, but it was stationary. No movement, just those intermittent flashes of white light that seemed to pulse every few seconds. The rhythm felt off, not like a usual blinker or hazard light. Curious, I reached for my phone and tried to get a better look through the patrol car's rear window, but the glass seemed to distort the light, making the flashes look like they were stretching and changing shape. I closed the door again, feeling a bit unsettled. After about 10 minutes, I noticed the patrol car's dash cam was still blinking, but when I tried to open the recording again, the feed cut out abruptly. The screen went blank. Then the display flashed white for a split second, so bright I had to look away, and the entire car went silent. No radio, no engine sound, no outside noise, nothing. It was like the world had paused. I looked around, heart pounding, but there was no movement outside, no light, no sound. I switched off the dash cam and the patrol lights, trying to reset everything. Slowly, the hum of the engine came back, then the distant sounds of crickets and night birds. I exhaled, wondering what had just happened. I got out of the car and looked around again. The other vehicle was gone. No tire marks, no door left open, nothing. Just empty road and trees. I radioed dispatch again. This time, the channel came alive with chatter like nothing had happened. Backup arrived a few minutes later and I explained what I'd found, but the other car was nowhere to be seen. No record of it on the traffic logs. I never did find out who left that car there or why it was running with the door open and no one around. The dashcam footage, it was erased. All of it except for a few seconds before the white flash. The files were corrupted beyond recovery. I went home that morning exhausted and confused, still feeling like something about that night didn't add up. I don't know what I saw exactly, but I keep thinking about that silence after the flash, the total absence of sound or movement, and how it seemed like time itself had stopped for a moment. Since then, I've double-checked my patrol car every night before my shift, but nothing else like that has happened. Still, that night sticks with me, like a question without an answer. I was working the night shift at the county sheriff's office, driving patrol out in the back roads where the trees crowd close to the dirt and the sky's just black with stars. It was just past midnight when dispatch buzzed me about a car spotted on an old logging road off Highway 47, about 10 miles from the nearest town. The report was vague: car running, headlights on, nobody around. Probably someone stranded or playing dumb, but it was the kind of call you still have to check. I headed out, my cruiser's tires kicking up dust as I peeled off the paved highway and onto the rutted dirt track. The place was dark except for the headlights of the car, a silver sedan sitting halfway off the road, engine still humming, lights bright against the shadows. I killed my cruiser's lights and pulled up behind it, staying a few feet back. I called it in. Unit 42, I've got the car, no driver in sight. The radio crackled back. Copy that. Any sign of the driver? Nope, nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out. The air was cool, maybe mid-50s, but dry. The only sounds were the distant buzz of insects and the steady hum of the car's engine. No birds or anything, which felt off for this time of year. I walked around the car slow, shining my light through the windows. The interior was empty. No bags, no jackets left behind, just the usual clutter you'd expect in a daily driver. Old receipts, a half-empty water bottle, a pack of gum crushed between the seats. Keys were still in the ignition. That's when I noticed the grass about 20 feet in front of the car. It was flattened in a series of perfect circles, like someone pressed down there but didn't just sit or lie down. The circles were maybe 2 or 3 feet across, perfectly round and scorched brown at the edges, like something hot touched the grass and burned it in those shapes. I scanned the area with my flashlight. The trees around were tall pines, casting long, dark shadows. The dirt road curved off to the left and disappeared into thick woods. I couldn't see footprints near the car or the circles, which was weird since the ground was dry but soft enough to hold prints. I called dispatch again. Dispatch, this is Unit 42. No sign of the driver. There's a cluster of burnt circular marks in the grass near the vehicle. No footprints or tracks leading away. Static on the other end. Understood, Unit 42. Back up en route. I sighed, wiped sweat off my forehead, even though it wasn't hot. The radio went quiet again, except for the faint hum of the car. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong about this scene, like the usual reasons someone would abandon a car. Accident, breakdown, medical emergency, didn't fit. No damage on the car, no evidence the driver was hurt or ran off in a hurry. I stayed near the passenger side, shining my flashlight on the circles. They looked like they were burned from the top down, not just pressed. The grass was crispy, but the soil underneath didn't look disturbed. If someone had been standing there holding something hot, you'd think there would be footprints or some other sign. But nothing. I pulled out my phone to snap pictures. As I raised it, I caught movement in the tree line just beyond the road. A shadow flickered between the trunks, too quick to make out, but definitely there. I dropped my phone to my side and trained the flashlight on the spot. Nothing. just trees and the dark. I tried to tell myself it was a deer or some small animal, but the way it moved was too deliberate for a wild animal. I felt my chest tighten. I wasn't one to spook easily, but out here with just my flashlight and that humming car, it felt like I was being watched. I took a step back toward the cruiser, thinking maybe I'd radio in again or wait for backup with the engine running. But then I heard it, a low vibration, like a distant engine, but not mechanical. It didn't come from the road or the woods. It was just there, underneath everything, almost under the ground. The car's engine sputtered once, then died. The headlights flickered, then went out. Total darkness. I fumbled for my flashlight and clicked it on, but the beam was weak, barely piercing the black. I looked back at the car. The circles in the grass were still there, but now the edges looked like they were glowing faintly, like embers, but cooler with a bluish tint. I called out into the dark. "Hello? You out here?" No answer. Only the quiet hum that had been there before, but now it seemed louder, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I radioed dispatch again. "Unit 42, car just shut off on its own. No response on the radio or phone signal is spotty. Backup ETA 10 minutes. Static again. Then silence. I moved back to the cruiser, double-checked my equipment. My phone showed no signal. I kept trying to call out, but nothing went through. Minutes passed. The humming faded, the faint glow from the circles disappeared. The air felt thick, like it had weight. My fingers started tingling, and my breathing felt heavier than it should. I told myself to stay calm. I was just a guy on patrol. Cars break down. People abandon vehicles for dumb reasons. But the absence of footprints, the burnt circles, the car shutting off all at once, it didn't make sense. I noticed the headlights on the cruiser were dimming too, like the batteries were draining faster than normal. I turned them off and sat inside, locked the doors. I kept scanning the road and tree line, watching for anything moving. After what felt like hours, but was probably closer to 20 minutes, the backup finally rolled up, headlights cutting through the dark. They called my radio. "Unit 43 here. We're on scene. What's the situation?" I explained everything. They looked at the circles in the grass and shook their heads, just as puzzled. One of the deputies called the fire department to check for any chemical or electrical burns. Nothing showed up. We searched the area thoroughly, but found no sign of the driver or any other disturbance. No footprints, no tracks, no campsites. Just that car and those weird scorched circles. We towed the car back to the station, and I stayed with it overnight, watching the footage from my cruiser's dash cam. The recording stopped a few minutes after I arrived at the car. The video flickered, then went to static. I rewound and watched again. Right before it cut out, the camera captured a flash of bright white light from the direction of the circles. I never heard anything else about the driver or that car. The report got filed under abandoned vehicle. I asked around, but nobody reported a missing person matching a description. The whole thing left me with this nagging feeling, like something was there that I couldn't see, like I was being watched the entire time, but by something that didn't want to be found. I still drive that road sometimes, especially late at night, and I swear I catch glimpses of light flickering between the trees. Nothing solid, just shadows and flashes. The circles in the grass never came back, but sometimes I wonder if they're still there, hidden beneath the weeds. I don't know what it was that night. All I know is it wasn't just a car left running with no driver. There was something else out there, something I couldn't explain. And that's the part that stays with me. I was driving home from work that night, the kind of late shift where the roads are mostly empty and the only company you get is the occasional truck rumbling past. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I was passing by a stretch of open fields that run alongside the highway out here in the middle of nowhere. Nothing much out there but tall grass and a few scattered trees. The kind of place where you'd expect to see deer or maybe a coyote if you're lucky. That's when I saw it, a bright orange light falling through the sky. It wasn't like a shooting star or a meteor, though. This thing dropped slower, like it was drifting down gently, glowing steadily with this deep, fiery orange hue. It wasn't flickering or flashing, just a solid, warm light that got bigger as it got closer to the ground. I slowed down, staring out the window, thinking maybe it was some kind of flare or a lantern that someone let go. But it didn't look right. The light was too steady, and it didn't seem to be drifting with the wind. It was heading straight for that field on the right side of the highway. I pulled over, grabbed my flashlight from the passenger seat, and stepped out of the truck. The air was cold and still, the kind of night where everything feels muted, like sound is absorbed by the dark. I walked toward where I thought the light had landed. The grass was tall and thick, and the ground was uneven, but as I got closer, I noticed something strange. There wasn't a crater or any sign of impact, no scorched earth or broken plants, just the field, the grass swaying softly in the breeze. But the air smelled different. There was this faint metallic scent, kind of sharp and clean, like the smell of iron mixed with something unfamiliar. I've never noticed anything like it out here before. I swept my flashlight around, looking for anything out of place, but all I saw was darkness and the tops of grass blades. The orange light was gone, too, like it had vanished. I waited there for a few minutes, thinking maybe it was just my eyes playing tricks on me, or some weird reflection from a distant farm or streetlight. Then I heard a soft humming, almost like electricity, but more organic. It wasn't loud, just this low, constant vibration in the air. I stopped moving, trying to pinpoint where it was coming from. It seemed to be all around me, coming from the ground itself. I looked down, but the grass looked normal, no wires or devices or anything that might make a sound like that. I decided to call it in just to report what I saw and smelled, in case it was something dangerous. My phone signal was weak out there, but I managed to get through to the local non-emergency line. The woman on the other end sounded skeptical, asked if I might have seen a plane or a drone, maybe a flare. I told her no, it was different. Then I described the metallic smell and the humming. She said she'd send someone to check it out, but honestly, I'm not sure anything ever came. I stayed by the edge of the field for about 20 minutes, but nothing else happened. The humming faded, the metallic smell went away, and the night went back to normal. When I got back in my truck, I looked at my phone again, and the battery had dropped way more than it should have, like something was draining it. I don't know if that was related, but it felt weird. Driving home, I kept glancing in my mirrors, feeling like I was being watched or followed. No cars behind me, no headlights, nothing. Just this feeling I couldn't shake. When I finally got home, I checked the field on Google Earth later. Nothing looked different. No marks, no damage, no signs of anything falling from the sky. I told a couple friends about it the next day, but they just shrugged it off, said I was probably tired or imagining things. Maybe I was, maybe not. But I know what I saw, and I still wonder what that orange light was, why it disappeared without a trace, and why the air smelled like that. I keep thinking about that field and the way everything felt heavier there, like the night itself was holding its breath. I haven't been back since. We were hiking one afternoon, just a group of friends taking it easy on a trail near the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just a way to kill time before summer really kicked in. The trail wasn't long or complicated, maybe a couple miles round trip, and we all knew each other from school, so it was pretty casual. At some point, I decided to take a quick detour off the path. Nothing big, just wanted to check out this spot I'd noticed earlier, a patch of moss and old tree roots that looked kind of cool. I'd told my friends I'd be right back, maybe 5 minutes tops, and they were fine with it. I figured I'd walk a little ways off the trail, take a few pictures, and then catch back up. But the weird thing is, when I turned back to find them, it felt like barely any time had passed. I mean, I'd only been gone for what I thought was 5 minutes, maybe less. The sun was still pretty high, the shadows hadn't moved much, and I wasn't even tired or thirsty. I called out a few times and eventually saw them a little ways down the trail, just standing there. They looked tense, like they were waiting for me, but not just waiting, like something was wrong. When I got up to them, the first thing I heard was Mike asking if I was okay. Then someone else said they were worried, that I'd been gone for almost 2 hours. I laughed it off at first. "No way," I said. "I was only gone a few minutes." They all looked at me like I was crazy. I checked my watch. The time hadn't jumped or anything. According to it, about 5 minutes had passed since I left the group. I told them that. They kept shaking their heads, insisting I couldn't have been gone that short because they'd been looking for me for almost 2 hours. That's when I noticed it. They looked worn out, like they'd been wandering for a long time. Clothes dirtier than when we started, faces a little scratched up. I was fine, not a scratch or a dirt smudge on me. Even my backpack was clean, like I hadn't been wandering through brush or anything. I asked them what happened while I was gone, and they said they kept walking down the trail, calling my name, turning back, pacing, getting lost in the woods. They told me how the path seemed to change, like the trees shifted around them, and the landmarks they'd seen before just disappeared. They said it felt like the trail stretched on forever, even though it shouldn't have. That's when it started to get weird for me, because the spot I'd gone to, where I'd been standing, was only a few hundred feet off the main trail, and I could see the trail itself from where I was. There was no way they could have gotten lost that badly or been wandering for 2 hours. The whole thing just didn't add up. I tried to suggest maybe they were exaggerating, maybe they lost track of time, but they were adamant. You could tell they really believed it. One of them mentioned hearing voices calling my name, but when they tried to follow, they never found where the sounds came from. They said the woods got too thick and the light started to fade, even though it was still early afternoon. We decided to head back, all of us together this time. I stuck close to the trail, keeping my eyes on familiar landmarks, but my friends kept glancing behind us like they thought something was following. I asked them about it, and they said they thought they saw something moving between the trees, just out of clear sight. They weren't sure if it was an animal or something else. The rest of the hike back was quiet. Everyone seemed jumpy. When we got out of the woods and back to the parking lot, I noticed my friends all had the same pale, tired look like they'd been through something rough. I felt okay, but a little shaken. I couldn't explain why. That night, I kept thinking about how the time we experienced didn't match up. 5 minutes for me, 2 hours for them, and the way the trail had changed for them, like it wasn't the same woods anymore. I checked my phone's location history the next day, and it showed my position staying around that spot for only a short while before moving back toward the parking lot. But my friends' phones had logs of walking in circles deeper into the forest for nearly 2 hours. I don't know what happened to them in those 2 hours. They don't really know either. They still get quiet when they talk about it, and none of us have gone back to that trail since. Something about that day didn't make sense, and none of us can figure out why time felt so different for me compared to everyone else. I guess all I can say is sometimes things happen that don't line up the way they should, and when they do, it's hard to know what to believe. I woke up sometime after midnight, or at least I think it was after midnight. It's hard to tell when you're out in the woods, no clocks or anything. What woke me wasn't a sound or a movement, but a soft blue glow coming through the fabric of the tent. It wasn't harsh or bright, just this strange, steady light filling the inside like someone had put a tiny screen on the other side of the nylon. At first, I thought maybe it was my phone or some kind of headlamp accidentally left on, but my phone was in my backpack and off, and I hadn't set any lights inside the tent. I reached over to grab my flashlight on the floor next to my sleeping bag and clicked the button. Nothing. The flashlight wouldn't turn on. I tried a couple more times, thinking maybe the batteries died, but the click sounded normal, just no light. The blue light stayed, and I lay there for a while, staring at the tent wall where the glow was coming from. It didn't flicker or pulse, just this calm, eerie blue that didn't feel natural at all. After a few minutes, something else settled in. This heavy feeling, like the air got thick and my body felt weighed down. It wasn't like normal tiredness or being sleepy. It was like gravity itself had increased, or maybe the whole space inside the tent had shrunk just a little. I could barely move my arms. I don't know how long that lasted. Time felt strange, like the seconds stretched out and folded back on themselves. I remember trying to tell myself it was probably just exhaustion or some kind of dream, but everything felt real. Then, almost as if someone flipped a switch, the blue light started to fade slowly until it was just gone. Right when the light disappeared, my flashlight finally clicked on. The small beam cut through the darkness, and the heaviness lifted like a curtain being pulled away. I sat up, flashlight in hand, heart pounding, but there was nothing outside the tent. No noises, no shadows, just the usual quiet of the forest at night. I looked around for something. Anything that could explain the light, maybe a nearby camper with a weird lantern. But the campsite was empty. I was alone. And I knew it because I hadn't seen anyone else set up tents anywhere close. The weirdness didn't stop there. When I stepped outside the tent, the ground felt different. It was damp, but not wet. Almost like the soil had been compressed or pressed down more than usual. I knelt and touched it, and it was cold to the point that the cold seemed to seep into my fingers. Normally, the earth at night around there was cool, but this was sharp and unnatural. I checked my watch to see how long I had been awake. It said 3:17 a.m., but that didn't make sense because I had gone to bed well after dark, maybe 10 or 11 p.m. I thought maybe I'd lost time, but the watch was working fine the rest of the weekend. Still, it felt like I'd been stuck in some strange bubble, like time had folded or skipped over me. I went back to the tent, sat on the edge of the sleeping bag, and tried to think it through. Maybe I dozed off and dreamed it all, but the blue light was too vivid and too strange to just be a dream. And the feeling in my body, the weight, the cold ground, it was all too real. The rest of the night passed without incident, but I kept glancing outside, half expecting the blue glow to return or something else to show up. The woods were quiet, almost too quiet, like the animals had disappeared or gone somewhere else. When morning came, I packed up quickly and left. I didn't tell anyone right away because I wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding crazy, but I kept going over everything in my head, trying to find a logical reason. Nothing fits. No campers, no equipment, no natural explanation for the light or the heaviness. I still don't know what it was. I don't know if I want to. But every time I camp now, I watch the sky and the shadows a little closer. And sometimes, when I close my eyes at night, I see that soft blue light again, just on the edge of my vision. I woke up in the middle of the night with this weird feeling like someone was watching me. It was one of those nights where the house felt quieter than usual. The kind of quiet that makes you listen harder for anything out of place. I reached for my phone on the nightstand and noticed it was already on. The camera app open. That's when I saw there was a photo taken recently. I hadn't touched my phone before falling asleep, and I definitely hadn't taken any pictures. The photo was of my bedroom window, but from the outside looking in. You could see my curtains and a little bit of the room behind them. It was dark outside except for a faint glow from the street lamp across the street. The angle of the photo made me realize someone had to be standing in my yard or just outside the house to take it. The thought hit me like a punch. I live alone, and I have no idea who could have been there. I sat up, heart racing, and looked out the window, though, but nothing was there. No movement, no shadows, no sounds. I checked the timestamp on the photo. It was taken around 2:14 a.m., just minutes before I woke up. I tried to remember if I had heard anything, but everything was too quiet, like someone had turned down the volume on the world. I grabbed my phone and checked the gallery for any other photos, but there was only that one. No videos, no bursts, nothing. It felt like whoever took it only wanted to get that single shot. I checked my front door and all the windows, locked and undisturbed. I kept looking out, but didn't see or hear anything. Still, the feeling didn't go away. Over the next hour, I kept hearing soft noises, almost like a faint tapping or scratching. But when I'd get up and check, there was nothing outside or anywhere near the house. My dog, who sleeps in the living room, was unusually quiet too, which was odd since she usually barks at the slightest sound. The next morning, I told a friend about it, but she just said maybe I had a weird dream or it was some glitch. But it wasn't like that. The photo was there, real and clear on my phone. I looked at it again and again, trying to find something that might explain it. A person, a reflection, anything. But it was just the window, quiet and still. I set up a small camera outside that night, pointed at the window. The footage didn't show anything unusual, just the empty yard and the street lamp flickering a bit in the wind. No sign of anyone approaching the house or taking pictures. It's been a few weeks now. Nothing else like that has happened. Nothing else like that has happened. But sometimes when I'm in the bedroom alone, I catch myself glancing at the window, half expecting to see someone standing there again. The photo's still on my phone, locked away in a folder I don't open often. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's better that way. I was sitting on the porch one night, just winding down after a long day. My dog, Max, was with me like usual, lying at my feet. It was quiet out. Nothing but the occasional sound of crickets and distant traffic. I'd been scrolling through my phone, mostly half paying attention to the dark sky above the trees. Then, without warning, Max sat up and stared straight up. Not at something moving, but just locked on one spot in the sky. His body went rigid, and he didn't blink or shift for what felt like forever. I figured he must have seen a bug or a bird or something, but there was nothing there. I looked too. Nothing. After a few minutes, Max was still fixed, eyes wide open and unblinking. He didn't make a sound. I called his name once, then again, and reached down to pull him away from the porch railing. He refused. He didn't try to run or anything, just planted himself like concrete. I pulled a little harder, but his muscles were stiff, as if he was glued in place. I started feeling a little weird about the whole thing. I mean, dogs can stare at something and not notice you, but Max was more stubborn than usual. Usually, if I tug on his leash, he follows. This was different. I asked myself what he was staring at so hard that he wouldn't move. I looked back at the spot in the sky. There was just blackness dotted with stars, the usual night sky over our small town. But as I watched, something strange started happening. The stars in that exact section of sky started to shift, slowly but definitely moving. Not like clouds drifting, but like the stars themselves were rearranging, sliding into new positions. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe it was a trick of the dark or my tired brain playing games. Max's eyes didn't move. He stayed locked on that spot like it was the only thing in the world. The shifting stars kept moving for almost 10 minutes. I thought maybe it was a plane or a satellite cluster, but the patterns were too weird, like geometric shapes forming and dissolving. I don't know how to explain it. The sky was alive in a way I'd never seen before. Eventually, the stars stopped shifting. The patterns settled back into normal star field. Only then did Max finally look away and stand up. I was so caught up in watching that I didn't realize how long we'd been out there. I grabbed his leash and headed inside. Max walked with me like nothing happened, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been watching us, or maybe I was watching something that wasn't meant to be seen. The next day, I checked the sky charts and weather reports, but there was nothing that could explain the weird star movement. No storms, no satellites scheduled for that time, no astronomy events. I told a few friends, but they just laughed it off as exhaustion or imagination. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was just a weird night. But sometimes when I look up, I wonder if Max saw something I never will, something small and quiet, but somehow huge. And I still can't explain why he wouldn't move until the stars finished shifting. I was out in the Mojave that weekend. I'd driven up from San Diego Friday morning, took some back roads past Barstow, and set up camp a little ways off a dirt trail I'd found on satellite maps. I go out there every few months to shoot long exposures and time lapses, just something I like doing. Quiet, no light pollution, stars bright as hell. I've got a decent DSLR setup, a couple lenses, tripod, intervalometer, the usual stuff. Nothing fancy, just enough to keep me occupied. That night I'd set up around 8:30, right after the sun dipped behind the hills. No wind, clear sky, perfect conditions. By 9:45, I had the tripod planted about 30 yards from my truck facing northeast. Got a wide shot of the sky with some Joshua trees in the foreground. I let that run on an interval, then took the other camera and started walking around for singles. Shots of the horizon, close-ups of the brush, some angled back toward my truck with the sky behind it. I try to get a mix, you know? Around 10:30, I noticed something weird out past the hills. Thought it was a plane at first. A white light, blinking slow, maybe a mile or two off, but it wasn't moving, just hanging there. I remember stopping mid-frame and waiting for it to change position. Nothing. No sound either. I stood there watching it for maybe 10 minutes. It'd blink once every 3 or 4 seconds. No pattern, just a slow, irregular pulse. I've seen a lot of planes out there, military ones too, but this thing wasn't acting like anything I recognized. Still, I didn't think much of it. Figured maybe it was a drone or some tower I hadn't seen during the day. I aimed my long lens at it and snapped a few shots. Couldn't get a clear focus. It was just too far, too dim. When I zoomed in on the screen, it looked like a dot with a faint ring around it, like glare or lens flare, but not exactly. It didn't line up with any light sources. Eventually I moved on, walked about 50 yards west to get some shots of a ridgeline. That's when I noticed something strange in the viewfinder. Every photo had this blur in it. Same spot, dead center. At first I thought the lens was smudged. I checked clean, swapped lenses, blur was still there. I switched to a different body, thinking maybe something was off with the sensor. Same thing. No matter which direction I pointed, north, south, toward my truck, away from it, there was this faint, soft edged blur hovering just left of center. It didn't look like dust or a scratch. It was consistent. Fixed in place on the frame, not the landscape. I even turned the camera 90 degrees. Same blur, same spot on the image. It creeped me out a bit. I've had gear issues before, but nothing like this. I took off the lens, looked through it, clear. Looked at the sensor with a flashlight. Nothing. I even took a few photos with the lens cap on to see if it was a light leak or something. Those came out black. No blur. I walked back toward the truck. The blinking light was still there, but it shifted lower, closer to the horizon. Still no sound. Still no movement. I checked my phone, but there was no signal. By 11:30, I started packing up. Not because I was scared exactly, but the gear wasn't behaving and I felt off, like something was watching. Hard to explain. The desert's quiet and I'm used to that, but this felt different, stifling. Like the silence was pressing in. As I folded up the tripod, I noticed the interior lights in the truck had come on. I hadn't unlocked it. They just turned on. I walked over and checked the doors, still locked. Lights went off as I got close. I stood there staring at it, waiting to hear the click of a relay or anything mechanical. Nothing. I got in and started the engine. No issues, but the radio was on a different station, some static-filled AM band I never use. I didn't touch it. Just drove a few hundred yards back toward the trail and parked again, thinking I'd sleep in the cab and head out early. I couldn't sleep. The blinking light was still visible, lower now, almost at the edge of a hill. I tried to ignore it, pulled my jacket over my head, but it was like my body wouldn't settle. That feeling again, like I was being watched, but not from one direction, from all sides. At some point, I must have drifted off because I woke up just before dawn. A pale light on the horizon, sky turning purple. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds, no insects, nothing. Usually there's some activity at that hour, even out there, coyotes, crickets, something. But it was dead still. I stepped out and checked around the truck. Nothing out of place. I walked back to where I'd been shooting. My footprints from the night before were still visible, but the ground around the tripod spot was smooth, like brushed. The tripod legs always leave small indentations in the dust, but there was no sign I'd even set up there. It looked freshly swept. That set me on edge. I checked the SD cards again. Most of the images were intact. The long exposure set from the early evening came out fine, but every single photo after I noticed the blinking light, every frame, had that blur. Same spot, same size, even the ones shot on different cameras. I zoomed in on one of them. The blur wasn't just soft, there were faint edges inside it. Not shapes exactly, but darker streaks, almost like movement caught mid-frame, but always in the same place, regardless of where the camera was pointed. Even when I took that photo facing completely south, the blur was still hanging to the left of center. It made no sense. I tried layering the images in editing software when I got home, thinking maybe I could isolate whatever was causing it. But the blur didn't move. It stayed in the same coordinates on every frame, even though the landscape and stars shifted, like it wasn't in the scene, it was on the sensor. But it couldn't have been. I used 2 cameras, different lenses, cleaned both, checked everything. The strangest part was the timestamps. I usually shoot in bursts or on an interval, so I know how long things take. But between 10:47 and 11:08, there were no images. Just a gap, no files. The camera didn't shut off, there was no break in the numbering. It just didn't record anything for 21 minutes. Then it picked back up like nothing happened. I've been through those folders 100 times now. Tried converting the RAWs, checking hidden files, recovering deleted data, nothing. Just that window of nothing. I haven't gone back to that spot since. I still shoot, just closer to town. I don't even bring both cameras anymore. That night wasn't dramatic or anything. No lights chasing me, no hallucinations, but it stuck with me. Something wasn't right out there. The blur's still in the photos. Doesn't go away, doesn't get worse, just hangs there. A smudge that doesn't belong. I was doing a solo night hike up a section of the Appalachian Trail near Damascus, Virginia. It wasn't anything extreme, just an overnight loop I'd done a few times before, out past Backbone Rock. I liked going at night sometimes. It sounds weird, but with the right headlamp and gear, it's peaceful. No crowds, no bikers, just forest. I started around 7 p.m., late fall, just getting cold enough at night to see your breath. I figured I'd do about 6 miles in, camp, then finish the loop in the morning. The trail was familiar enough that I didn't need to check GPS much. I had service for the first couple miles, but lost it after the switchbacks. Everything was normal for a while. I could hear some wind through the trees, a few owls, some rustling here and there. I kept a steady pace, took a break to drink some water, nothing strange. My headlamp lit the trail fine. I don't carry much, just a small pack, tarp, water, and my phone for emergencies. It was about 10 p.m. when I noticed a light off to the right, down through the trees. It was maybe 100 yards off the trail, low to the ground, just hovering. My first thought was another hiker, maybe someone setting up camp or walking with a lantern, but it wasn't flickering or moving. It was just there, steady, white and round, maybe the size of a basketball from where I stood. I turned off my headlamp to get a better look. The light didn't waver at all. No shadows, no flickering. It wasn't attached to anything. I watched it for a minute or two, expecting it to move or fade, but it just stayed perfectly still. It wasn't casting any light around it either, like the glow didn't touch the branches or the ground, which I only noticed because everything else got so dark. I decided to try filming it. I pulled out my phone and opened the camera, but as soon as I lifted it, the screen went completely black. Not like it was off, more like it was frozen. Backlight on, but no image, just a dark screen. I pressed the power button, but it didn't respond. I held it down for a hard reset, nothing. The haptic feedback wasn't even working. I tapped the screen a few times, swiped, still black. I lowered the phone and looked back at the light. Still there, still completely silent. No bugs, no wind now, just this unnatural quiet. I don't know why, but I suddenly had this urge to back away. Not run, not panic, just a solid instinct that I wasn't supposed to get closer. I hadn't even left the trail yet. I turned around slowly and started walking back the way I came, just enough to get some distance. After about 20 steps, I glanced back, and the light was gone. I stopped and checked my phone again. This time the screen lit up like normal, and the home screen was back. Camera worked fine. I even took a picture of the trail, just to be sure. Battery hadn't drained, no overheating warning, nothing in the logs when I checked later. I kept walking, didn't turn my light back on for a while. I just wanted to get to camp and be done with the night. I wasn't scared exactly, but I felt off, like something was watching or waiting. I made it to my usual camping spot, about a mile further, near a clearing where I could see some stars. I didn't build a fire, just ate a protein bar, drank some water, laid under the tarp, and waited for morning. Every little sound made me flinch. I didn't sleep much, maybe an hour or two in short bursts. Around 3 a.m., I thought I saw the same light again, this time way farther off, up the ridge across the clearing. It was just barely visible through the trees, hovering above the ground again. I didn't get up. I didn't try to film it. I just laid there, facing away, holding my breath. After maybe 20 minutes, it was gone. I left before sunrise and didn't stop until I got back to my car. I didn't see anyone else on the trail, no signs of campsites or other hikers. I didn't report anything. What would I even say? The phone never acted up again. I checked the GPS logs later, and there was a 5-minute gap around the time I first saw the light. Could have been the signal or nothing. But it was weird. It's never done that before. That was 8 months ago. I still hike, but not alone at night. I was skiing alone that day, which I know isn't smart, but I'd done that stretch of backcountry dozens of times and knew it pretty well. It was late February, right after a storm had dumped fresh powder over the Cascades. I'd parked off the main highway and hiked in about a mile before switching to skins. The plan was to do a slow loop around a ridge I liked and be back to the car by mid-afternoon. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. Dumb, I know. The snow was perfect. Dry, light, untouched. No other tracks except the ones I was making. The sky was overcast but not threatening, flat gray, with no wind and just enough light coming through to keep visibility decent. The silence out there is always intense, but that day it felt extra heavy. No birds, no planes overhead, just the sound of my skis moving through the snow and my breathing. I followed a line along a gentle slope, taking my time. Around noon, I cut through a narrow stand of fir trees and came out into this wide, open basin, maybe the size of a couple football fields. It was surrounded on 3 sides by thick trees and had a shallow dip in the middle, like a natural bowl. I'd been there once or twice before, but never dropped into it because the snow tended to slide after storms. What caught my eye immediately was how smooth the bowl looked. I mean, perfectly smooth. No wind scour, no crust, just an unbroken white surface, like someone had ironed the whole thing flat. I stood there for a minute, just looking. I couldn't figure out what felt wrong until I realized there were no animal tracks. None. Not a rabbit, not a squirrel. Nothing had touched it. That's when I saw the indentation. It was off-center in the bowl, maybe 30 yards from where I was standing. At first, I thought it was a drift or a sink, but the edges were too defined. I skied closer, slowly, checking the snow stability as I went. When I got near it, I stopped. The size of it didn't register right away because it was so uniform, but it had to be at least 30 feet across, perfectly circular, maybe a foot or 2 deep in the center, tapering evenly all the way around. I skied up to the edge and looked down into it. It didn't look made exactly. There were no ridges, no pressure marks, no cracks in the snow, just this shallow, perfect depression, like something very heavy had settled there without actually hitting the snow. No scorch marks, no debris, and no tracks leading in or out. I checked, circled it twice, nothing. I didn't step into it, I don't know why, but I didn't want to. I just stood there, staring into the middle. I wasn't scared yet, just confused. The longer I looked at it, the more it bothered me. It didn't belong there. I pulled my phone out to take a photo, but the camera wouldn't load. The phone didn't freeze, it just acted like it didn't have the app installed. I tried opening it twice, then gave up. I checked my signal, nothing, which was normal out there. That's when I noticed the sound, or rather, the lack of it. Total silence, not even the soft whoosh of wind through the trees. I held my breath and listened. It was the kind of silence that makes your ears ring a little. I looked around. Everything looked normal. Gray sky, white snow, dark trees, but it felt wrong, like the air was too still. I took a few steps back from the edge and turned to leave. Right then I got this weird sensation, like a thud, but not sound. More like I felt it in my body. A pressure change, maybe. My ears popped slightly. It only lasted a second. I spun around, expecting to see an avalanche coming down or something falling from the trees, but there was nothing. The bowl looked exactly the same. The indentation hadn't changed. I stood there waiting. Nothing moved, no noise. I glanced up at the sky. Still flat gray, but I had the strangest feeling that something was above me. Not like a plane. Closer. I don't even know what made me think that. I couldn't see anything, but I felt it. My shoulders tensed up without me realizing. I ducked my head like something might hit me. I don't know how long I stood there. Probably only a minute, but it felt longer. Then just as suddenly, I could hear again. The wind picked up, soft at first, then stronger. A couple birds called out from the trees. It was like someone hit unpause on the forest. I turned and skied out of there fast. Didn't stop until I was halfway back to the car. I didn't look behind me. The whole time I felt like I was being watched. Not chased, just watched. That prickling feeling on the back of your neck when someone's staring at you, even if you can't see them. I kept catching myself looking up, but the sky stayed the same. Overcast, flat, dull. When I made it back to the car, I loaded my gear and checked my phone again. Camera opened fine. Signal was still dead, but that was normal. I drove back down to the highway and didn't stop until I hit the first town with gas and cell service. That night, when I looked in the mirror, I noticed a weird red mark on my collarbone. It looked like a bruise, but didn't hurt. A faint circular outline about the size of a quarter. Could have been from my backpack strap, I guess, but I don't remember anything rubbing there. The next weekend, I went back, with a buddy this time. Same trail, same route. We got to the same ridge, cut through the trees into the basin, and the indentation was gone. Not filled in. Gone. The snow was still smooth in the bowl, but it looked like regular wind-swept terrain again. Animal tracks everywhere. Nothing out of the ordinary. My friend didn't think anything of it. I didn't mention the weird feeling or the sound, just said I'd seen something strange last time and wanted to check it out. I pretended it was probably a collapsed snowdrift or something. We did the full loop and left without anything weird happening. I still ski that area sometimes, but I avoid that basin now. I don't like going near it. Something about it just stuck with me. Not in a dramatic way. It's not like I dream about it or obsess over it, but every now and then, usually when I'm out alone, I'll remember how the snow looked. How perfect it was. How quiet. Like something came down, touched the earth, and left without leaving anything but a dent. We were about halfway through the trail when it happened. My friends and I were hiking out at this state park near our town. Nothing fancy, just some woods and a few dirt paths that wind through a few hills. We'd gone out early that morning, just looking to get away from screens and noise, the kind of thing we'd done plenty of times before. The weather was good, a bit cloudy, but not enough to ruin the day. Birds were chirping, the usual sounds of the forest. We were joking around, catching up on stuff from school and plans for the summer, nothing serious. I was lagging behind a bit, just taking pictures on my phone, trying to catch some shots of the trees and whatever I could find. My friend Matt was up ahead, always the fastest walker. Then Sarah and Josh were somewhere in the middle. We hit this little clearing maybe 2 miles in. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a small backyard, surrounded by thick trees that blocked most of the light. The ground was softer there, covered in pine needles and a few scattered leaves. The air felt a little heavier than usual, but I didn't think much of it. Maybe the weather was shifting. Suddenly, Matt stopped. We'd all been moving pretty steadily, but he just froze, mid-step, like someone hit pause on him. I noticed because his shadow stopped moving, and I turned to look. He wasn't looking at anything on the ground or around him. He was staring straight up at the sky. His mouth was slightly open, but no sound came out at first. Then, he started murmuring, but it didn't make any sense. Not words or sentences, just a low, constant muttering that sounded like gibberish. It was kind of like he was whispering to himself, but in a way that didn't seem human. The kind of murmuring that puts you on edge because it's so wrong. We all stopped and looked at him. Sarah called his name a couple times, but he didn't blink or move. Josh stepped closer, trying to get his attention, but Matt just kept staring upward, mumbling the same nonsense over and over. The weirdest part was the way his eyes looked. They were wide open, but vacant, like he was seeing something none of us could. I tried to see what he was looking at, but the sky was just the usual patchy gray clouds. Nothing strange that I could tell. Minutes passed. I didn't time it exactly, but I swear it was at least 3. The murmuring never stopped, and he didn't shift or respond. It was unsettling in a way that made my skin crawl. After what felt like forever, Matt suddenly blinked, like he was waking up. His mouth snapped shut, and he looked around like he'd just realized where he was. His face changed from blank to confused. "Did I just... what?" he said, voice shaky. We asked him what was wrong, but he said he didn't know. He had no memory of freezing or staring at the sky or mumbling. He just remembered walking and then suddenly feeling foggy, like his head was underwater. We tried to brush it off at first, thinking maybe he just spaced out or had a moment of dizziness, but something about it didn't sit right. Matt's never been one to zone out like that, not for more than a few seconds. And the way he was muttering nonsense, eyes wide open like that wasn't normal. We kept going after a few minutes, but the mood changed. No one really talked much. We all kept glancing at Matt, who was looking pretty shaken. His hands were shaking a little when he reached for his water bottle. About 20 minutes later, as we walked through another stretch of trees, I noticed my phone acting weird. The GPS kept jumping around, flickering between our location and a spot just a few hundred feet off the trail, deep in the woods. I checked the signal bars, which were full, but the map kept glitching. The same happened with Josh's phone, then Sarah's. It was like the forest was messing with our devices, but there was no obvious reason. No tunnels, no big cliffs, just trees. Then I started hearing sounds. At first, I thought it was just the wind, but it wasn't right. It was this low hum, kind of a droning noise that felt like it vibrated through the air. It wasn't loud, but it was constant. The weird thing was, the closer we got to the edge of that clearing where Matt had frozen, the louder the hum got. No one else said anything about it, but I could tell they heard it too because they all stopped walking and looked around. I tried to call Matt's name softly, just to break the tension, but before I could, he froze again. This time it was quicker. His head tilted upward, eyes wide and blank again, but the muttering didn't start. Instead, his body just went stiff, and he stood there motionless for maybe a minute. I swear the hum got louder while he was like that. Then, just as suddenly, he blinked and shook his head. He looked around, confused again, like he just snapped out of a trance. "I don't know what's going on," he said, voice low. "I just lost time." We wanted to leave right then. It felt like something was wrong with the air, like the clearing was some kind of pocket that didn't belong. Josh joked nervously that maybe we should call it a day, and Sarah agreed. On the way back, everything felt off. The GPS glitches kept happening. The hum was still faint, but never stopped. And Matt was quiet, eyes darting every so often, like he was waiting for something to happen. I tried to joke about it to break the mood, but even my own voice sounded strange in the silence. When we got back to the parking lot, the phone snapped back to normal. The GPS locked on, the signal bars steadied, and the hum disappeared. The air felt lighter. Matt kept saying he didn't remember anything from those frozen moments. No images, no feelings, nothing. Just a blank. We all agreed not to bring it up at school or with anyone else. It felt better that way, like some things are better left unexplained. I still think about it sometimes. The way Matt just stopped, the nonsense he muttered, the hum that seemed to come from nowhere, and that clearing where time felt wrong. I don't know what it was, and I'm not sure I want to, but I know something was there that day, something that watched us, maybe even tried to reach out, and whatever it wasn't human. I was 16 when this happened, and I was obsessed with drones. I saved up for months doing lawn work to get a decent one. Nothing military grade or anything, just a DJI with a decent camera and thermal mode. I flew it almost every day after school, especially on weekends. I live in a rural area, mostly farmland, so there's a lot of open space to mess around in. I'd go out behind our property and fly it over the fields, woods, and the old irrigation canals that barely run anymore. This was in early fall, right after harvest, so the corn was all cut down and the fields looked bare. Kind of eerie when everything's just flat and brown and quiet. I remember the air felt thick that day, like it wanted to rain but never quite got there. Cloud cover was low, but solid. No sun peeking through. I went out around 5 p.m. It gets darker faster that time of year, but I still had enough light. I launched the drone from behind the barn and flew it west over Mr. Collins' property. He was fine with it. He actually liked watching the footage sometimes. His land stretches for a few miles, mostly soybean fields and some cattle farther out. No houses back there, just fence lines and those thin dirt access roads. Everything started normal. I did a few wide sweeps, got some shots of the tree lines, checked out an old windmill. Then I kicked it into thermal for fun. I liked looking for deer or coyotes in the brush. Usually you'd see little white smudges running through the fields, but it was dead quiet. No animals, no movement. That's not super rare during certain parts of the day, but it felt strange. I remember thinking it was like the whole area had emptied out. I was flying at about 400 feet when I saw something move near the top edge of the thermal feed. Just a blur at first. I switched back to regular video to try and spot it, but I couldn't see anything, just gray clouds. Then it passed through the frame again, this time clearer. It wasn't a bird, not the way it moved. It was too fast, too smooth. The shape was weird too. Narrow at the front and rounder at the back, like a teardrop or a water droplet flipped on its side. No wings, no tail. It moved perfectly horizontal, just under the cloud layer, fast but not jerky. It didn't make any sound. That was the first thing I noticed when I took off the headset and listened. Nothing. Usually, even high-flying jets have a distant roar. This thing was close enough that it should have made some kind of noise, but it was totally silent. I tried to follow it with the drone, but it was moving too fast. I adjusted the altitude and pointed the camera up more. On the screen I saw it again, just for maybe 3 seconds. Same shape, same movement. It didn't wobble or spin. It was like it was locked into some invisible rail under the clouds. I switched back to thermal. Nothing. I mean, nothing. It should have shown up. Planes and even birds give off heat. But the screen was empty. Even when I scrubbed back the footage later, there was no heat trail, no change in temperature. Like it wasn't there at all. I hovered for a while, scanning the sky. My heart was beating fast, and I was trying to tell myself it was probably a drone or some government test, something explainable, but it didn't feel right. The way it moved wasn't like anything I'd ever seen, and I'd watched hours of drone videos, military flight tests, all that. Then the drone glitched. The screen froze for about 2 seconds, then cut to static. I thought I lost connection, but the controller still said I had full bars. The feed came back, but the colors were off, washed out, almost like an old VHS. I started bringing it back manually. As it returned, I noticed the wind picking up. It had been still earlier, but now it was rustling through the grass and pushing the tops of the trees. Not a storm wind, just enough to be strange. When the drone got back over my property, I heard it again and looked up. Still no sound, but I saw that shape, barely, cutting across the sky from south to north. It was almost camouflaged. Not invisible, but blending in, like how heat waves ripple in the air. If I hadn't been looking right at it, I might have missed it. I landed the drone fast, got it shut down, then just stood there staring at the sky. My dog came around the side of the barn, barking like crazy. He's old and doesn't usually bark unless someone's at the door or a car pulls up. He didn't look up, just paced in circles and barked nonstop. The sky stayed quiet after that. Nothing else passed over and the wind settled down. Later that night, I went through the footage frame by frame. You could barely see it, just this blur moving way too smooth, too fast, and too low for any kind of normal aircraft. No sound, no lights, no heat. I showed it to my uncle the next weekend. He's a retired Air Force mechanic, and he watched the clip maybe 10 times and just said, huh. I never posted it anywhere. I deleted it a few weeks later. I don't know why. It just felt wrong to keep, like it wasn't meant to be recorded. I still fly the drone sometimes, but I don't fly it out over the farms anymore. Just around the yard, just where I could see it. We were about 4 miles in when the sun started going down. Not a big deal. We had headlamps, and the trail was easy to follow. It was one of those wide, pine-lined ridges with almost no undergrowth, and the dirt was dry and packed. Pretty quiet too, except for wind in the trees and our footsteps. We weren't even talking much by that point, just kind of settling into that tired rhythm where you stop making conversation and just walk. It was me and Ryan. He was ahead, maybe 10 feet or so. I kept checking the GPS because I thought we'd already passed the spot where the trail split. It hadn't shown up yet, and we didn't want to miss it and add another hour to the hike back. Anyway, I was looking down at the screen when I heard this sound that made me stop. It wasn't loud, just strange, like a crackle or a static pop. At first I thought it was my headlamp. It had flickered once earlier, so I thought maybe the battery was going. But when I looked up, Ryan had stopped too, and he was looking around with this weird look on his face. "You hear that?" he said. "Yeah." It sounded again, like static, but not coming from any direction I could pinpoint. It wasn't behind us or ahead, it was above. Not loud, but close somehow, like it was just out of reach. A pulsing hiss, but with weird little breaks in it, like fragments. Almost like someone trying to tune a radio that wouldn't lock onto a signal. There was a rhythm to it, too, not random. We stood there listening for a while. The sound came and went, never staying more than a few seconds, but each time it came back, it was slightly different. Higher pitched, then lower. Sometimes fast, then slower. Not like wind or branches creaking. Definitely not animals. After maybe a minute, Ryan said, "You think that's some kind of comms interference?" I didn't answer. I was staring up at the sky, which was this deep blue now, darker near the tree line. I didn't see anything. No planes, no flashes, but the sound was still coming, like it was dropping down through the air in waves. We kept going, not talking much. The trail dipped into a shallow ravine and came back up, and the sound stopped for a while. We figured maybe it was gone. But then, as we got near this little clearing, it started again, louder this time, and clearer. It actually made us both freeze. It wasn't just static anymore. There were these little stutters mixed in, like syllables, or something trying to be syllables. I wouldn't call it words, not really. But it wasn't just noise. The cadence was too intentional, like something trying to imitate speech but missing a layer, like hearing a voice through water or inside your own head. We didn't say anything, just stood there, watching the trees. Then Ryan looked up again, slowly, and I followed his gaze. There was nothing in the sky, no movement, no color. Just stars starting to show through, scattered and faint. But the sound was still above us. I held my breath and listened harder. The hissing faded a little, but then it changed direction, as if something drifted a few feet to the side. There was no wind, no shift in the air, but the sound moved. Ryan muttered something like, "Screw this," and picked up pace. I followed, glancing over my shoulder more than I usually would. There was no real reason to be scared, but it didn't feel right. The forest didn't feel empty anymore. The trees were too still, too sharp in the dark, like everything was holding its breath. We hit the split in the trail about 10 minutes later, and by then we were both fully in headlamp mode, not talking. The sound had mostly stopped, just a faint clicking now and then like dry leaves underfoot, but not from our feet. It came from off to the right. We didn't go that way. We stuck to the main loop, picked up our pace. Ryan kept checking over his shoulder, and I could tell he was trying not to freak himself out. He's not the type to spook easy. Used to do solo hikes, even overnight ones, but something about this had him rattled. I could feel it off him. About 20 minutes later, when we were nearing the parking area, I noticed something strange about the headlamp beam. Mine was flickering faintly. Just a little. Not dying, more like something was interfering. Ryan's did the same thing. They'd both been fully charged. Then, right before we came around the last bend, the sound came back one last time, louder than ever, like a burst. It was overhead again, and I swear I felt something like pressure in the air, just for a second. Not heat or cold, just weight. A hum behind my eyes. It didn't last long, maybe 2 seconds, 3. Then gone. We came around the last turn, and the lot was there empty, except for Ryan's car. Everything felt normal again. Bugs were buzzing, air was cool and still. Our lamps stopped flickering. We didn't say much during the drive back. Ryan just had this blank look, both hands on the wheel, not even playing music like he usually did. I don't know if he was trying to make sense of it or just forget it. Probably both. Later that night, I checked my phone. I'd left the GPS app running by accident, and it had tracked our route. Everything looked fine, except for one weird thing. Right around the spot where we heard the loudest burst, there was this tiny detour in the path. Not even a full loop, just a short, curved drift like we'd stepped off trail for a few seconds and come back. Neither of us remembered doing that. There were no side paths there, and our footprints had stayed single file the whole way. I texted Ryan about it. He didn't reply for 2 days. When he did, all he said was, "Let's not go back to that one." We didn't. I work seasonal in a national park up north, mostly maintaining trails and setting up cameras for wildlife research. It's the kind of job where you spend a lot of time alone, just walking through the woods, checking cameras, noting animal signs, that sort of thing. The park's pretty big, a lot of remote areas, dense forest, and places no one really goes except the occasional hiker or ranger like me. One day, I was going through the footage from one of the trail cameras we'd set up near a clearing where deer are known to gather. The camera was mounted on a tree about 10 feet up, facing a little meadow surrounded by thick pine and spruce. We put it there to monitor how often deer and other animals use that spot, especially at dawn and dusk. The day before, I'd checked the camera briefly, and everything looked normal. Just some squirrels, a couple of rabbits, the usual. But when I watched the latest footage that afternoon, there was something weird. The video showed a deer running full speed across the clearing. It was a big doe, moving fast, the kind you'd expect to see when something's spooked. Then, right in the middle of the frame, the image turned to static for just a split second. Less than a second, really. And when it cleared, the deer was gone, like it had vanished mid-run. No sign of it leaving the frame, no camera angle change, just nothing where it was a moment before. At first, I thought maybe the camera malfunctioned. These trail cams can be glitchy, especially with cold weather or battery issues. But the footage before and after that moment was crystal clear, and the timestamp was continuous, no jumps or skips. I watched it a few times, slowing it down, trying to convince myself I was just seeing things. But the more I looked, the stranger it felt. The deer's legs were still moving, mid-stride, then static, and then nothing. No blurry trail, no disappearing behind a tree, just gone. I mentioned it to my supervisor, who shrugged it off, saying maybe it was a brief interference or a recording glitch. But he asked me to check the physical site anyway, to see if anything was wrong with the camera or the surroundings. So the next morning, I went out there early, before the sun was up. The forest was quiet, and the clearing looked normal. No broken branches, no disturbed ground, nothing that suggested a chase or struggle. The grass was undisturbed, except for some fresh deer tracks on the far edge, but none leading out from the middle where the deer had vanished in the footage. I circled the clearing a couple of times, scanning the trees and underbrush, thinking maybe the deer had darted into some thick bushes or a hidden path. But the area was open, no place for an animal that size to disappear so suddenly without leaving a trace. What unsettled me more was how still the forest felt. Usually mornings are filled with birds, squirrels rustling, wind through the leaves, something. But that day, everything was quiet. No bird song, no insects, nothing. Just a deep, unnatural silence. I stayed there for maybe 15 minutes, waiting to see if something would move or make noise, but nothing did. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, but every time I looked around, there was no one. No people, no animals, just trees. I packed up the camera and headed back to camp. On the way, I noticed the air felt thicker, like humidity, but without the usual damp smell. It was hard to explain, but my skin kind of prickled, like the atmosphere was off. That night, I showed the footage to a couple of the other rangers, hoping they'd have some logical explanation. One of them said maybe the static was from a bird flying too close to the camera, messing with the sensor. But that didn't make sense to me. The static covered the exact spot where the deer had been, not just a flash or blur over the whole frame. A few days later, I checked the camera again, this time setting it up with an extra battery and memory card, just in case. That night, nothing unusual showed up on the footage. A few deer wandered through, squirrels, an owl or two, but no weird glitches or missing animals. Still, I kept thinking about that moment with the doe. It was like something had just erased it from the world for a fraction of a second. The weirdness didn't stop there, though. After that day, I started noticing little things during my hikes. Sometimes I'd hear rustling off in the distance, but when I turned to look, there'd be no movement or animals. Other times, I'd see shadows out of the corner of my eye, shapes shifting between trees that disappeared when I tried to focus on them. One afternoon, while hiking alone on a narrow trail, I felt like someone was walking just behind me. I kept stopping and turning, but no one was there. The feeling stayed with me the whole hike back to camp. At night, I had trouble sleeping. I'd hear noises, soft tapping on the tent, branches scraping, but when I'd check, nothing was outside. I even swore I caught glimpses of dim lights between the trees, far off but definitely there. I didn't say much about it. It felt embarrassing, like maybe I was just tired or stressed. The job gets lonely sometimes, and your mind can play tricks. But after a week, something else happened. I was out early, walking back from checking a different camera, when I caught sight of a light flickering through the trees ahead. It wasn't like a flashlight or a campfire. The light was steady but kind of wrong. It didn't have a color or warmth like firelight or bulbs. It was pale, almost like a reflection, but it didn't move or blink. I slowed down, trying to get a better look. The light was hovering maybe 30 feet off the ground between two tall pines. I thought about calling out, but my voice felt stuck in my throat. Then, after maybe 20 seconds, the light just went out. No fading, no moving away. Just nothing. I kept walking, my heart thumping. When I glanced back, there was no trace of the light. The forest looked normal again. That night, I finally decided to pack up and leave the park early. I told my supervisor I wasn't feeling great and wanted to get back to town. He didn't ask much, just said okay. On the drive home, I kept thinking about the deer in the footage, about the silence, the light, and all the little things that didn't add up. I didn't tell anyone else. I figured they'd think I was making it up or losing it. I still don't know what I saw or experienced out there. The footage is real, that's for sure. The deer disappears, and the static is on the camera. Everything else is just me, my memories, and the quiet spaces in the woods that felt like they weren't quite right. I don't plan on going back anytime soon. Something in that forest doesn't want to be found, or maybe it just doesn't want to be seen. I'd been hiking alone for a few hours, just me and the trail. It was late summer, early evening, the kind of time when the sun's starting to dip, but there's still plenty of light. I was heading up this ridge in a national forest I'd been to before. Nothing too wild, but remote enough that I didn't expect to see anyone else. I just needed to get away from everything for a while. The hike itself wasn't anything special. The usual birds calling, the wind through the pines, the buzz of insects. I remember thinking how nice it was that the weather held up, no rain in sight. I kept a steady pace, stopping now and then to catch my breath or look back at the valley below. The air smelled like pine needles and dirt, and the light was softening as the sun sank lower. When I finally got close to the top of the ridge, something felt off. I was used to a bit of wind there. Ridges catch the breeze, and usually you get birds circling overhead or a squirrel or two darting through the trees. But this time, none of that was happening. I stopped and looked around, expecting to hear at least the usual ambient sounds of the forest. Nothing. No wind rustling the leaves, no birds chirping or calling, no insects buzzing or crawling. Just silence. Dead silence. The kind that's too complete, the kind that makes your ears ring a little because your brain is desperate for something to focus on. At first, I thought maybe it was just a calm moment, like a lull before a storm or something. So I stood there for a minute, trying to listen. That's when I noticed a faint hum. It was barely there at first, almost like white noise, but then it got clearer. The weird part was that it wasn't coming from any one direction. It filled the air evenly, like the whole ridge was humming. I put my hand over my mouth, hoping to block out the sound and maybe focus on natural noise again, but the hum didn't go away. It felt low and steady, vibrating through the air. The strange thing was the way it affected me physically. I felt this weird buzzing in my teeth, like the fillings in my molars were vibrating in sync with the hum. It was subtle at first, then got stronger, and honestly, a little uncomfortable. I'm not one to freak out easily, but I was starting to feel uneasy. I scanned the ridge around me. The trees were still, the sky was clear, and there was no sign of animals anywhere. Usually, even if you don't see wildlife, you hear something. A bird flapping, a chipmunk running, a branch cracking. But here, it was just that hum and this unsettling quiet. I pulled out my phone to check the time and see if maybe there was some kind of weather alert or something weird reported. No notifications, no unusual weather conditions, nothing. Signal was weak, but still there, which surprised me given how remote this spot was. I took a couple of tentative steps forward, planning to crest the ridge and keep going. But the moment I moved, the hum seemed to pulse a little louder. My teeth started buzzing again, stronger this time, and I felt this pressure building in my head. I stopped, hoping it was just in my imagination. That's when I noticed something else. The usual sense of space was off. I don't know how to explain it exactly, but it was like the air itself felt heavier, thicker, like walking through water, except there was no water anywhere. I looked down at the ground, but the dirt and rocks looked normal. No strange markings, no discoloration. I tried calling out just a quick hello to see if anyone was nearby. No answer, no echo, no sound returning from the trees or valley below. Just silence. It got harder to stand still. The hum was constant now, filling my head, making it hard to focus. My teeth hurt a little from the vibration, and I felt dizzy. I thought about sitting down to wait it out, but I didn't want to get stuck up there. Something about the silence felt wrong. I started heading back down the trail, slow and cautious. As I descended, the usual sounds started creeping back in. At first, a distant bird call, then the rustle of leaves as a breeze picked up again. The hum faded gradually, like someone was turning down a volume knob. My teeth stopped buzzing, and the pressure in my head lifted. When I reached the base of the ridge, everything was back to normal. The forest sounded alive again, bugs chirping, birds singing, the wind whispering through the trees. I checked the timestamp on my phone. About 20 minutes had passed since I got to the top of the ridge, but the feeling of that silence and hum stayed with me. I told a few people later, but they just laughed it off. Must have been your ears, or probably some weird radio interference. Maybe they're right. Maybe it was all in my head. But something about that spot on the ridge felt off, like a place caught between two worlds or something. I haven't been back since. Not yet. I noticed it the morning after that weird lightning storm we had. It wasn't even a real storm, just a few sharp flashes around 2 or 3 in the morning. No thunder, no rain. Just light. Enough to wake me up and make the dogs bark, but nothing came of it. I figured it was heat lightning or maybe transformers blowing somewhere, though I didn't hear any pops. Didn't think much of it until the next morning. I was walking the north pasture around 7, checking the fence line like I do every day. That part of the property's flat and mostly open, about 4 acres of grazing field, nothing fancy. We've had a dry summer, so the grass had been yellowing, but still thick and tall in most spots. As I came over the little rise near the southeast corner, I saw something off about 50 yards out. The color looked wrong. It was a square, dead center in the pasture, about 20 feet by 20, just sitting there like someone had laid carpet down. The grass in that square wasn't just dry or scorched, it was gray, a flat, dull gray, like someone had drained all the color out of it. Not patchy, completely uniform. The edges were sharp as a knife, perfect right angles, no feathering or fade. I walked up to it real slow. Not because I was scared, but because it looked fake, like some kind of prank or trick on the eyes. But the closer I got, the more wrong it felt. The grass was standing straight up, same height as the rest of the field, but the blades were stiff and dry, almost like wire. I touched one and it snapped off between my fingers. Not crunchy like dead grass usually is, brittle like plastic, and cold. It was already pushing 80 degrees out and the sun had been up for an hour, but that square was noticeably cooler. No dew either, even though the rest of the pasture had a light sheen on it. I tried pulling a handful up. The roots came clean, no resistance, and underneath it the dirt looked pale. Not white exactly, but washed out like the soil had been bleached. The weirdest part? No bugs, no ants, no beetles, no worms, just nothing. I dug down a couple inches with my pocket knife and didn't see a single living thing. The cows wouldn't go near it. They usually wander all over that pasture in the mornings, but that day they were clustered at the far end, just standing still, looking in that direction. Not grazing, not moving around, just watching. That afternoon, I tried bringing the dogs out. I had 2 at the time, both mutts, both curious as hell about everything. But as soon as we got within maybe 20 feet, they stopped. One of them started whining, tail between her legs, and the other growled low and steady, like he saw something I didn't. They both backed away, pulling at their leashes, wouldn't go any closer. The next day the wind picked up, gusty and dry, the kind of wind that usually lays the tall grass flat in waves. But that gray square didn't move. Not a single blade shifted. I stood out there for 10 minutes watching it, and the grass all around it bent and swayed, but the square stayed perfectly still, like it was sealed off from everything around it. I didn't tell anyone right away. Partly because I figured it might go away on its own, and partly because I didn't want to sound like I was losing it. I took a photo with my phone, but it didn't come out right. It looked like a shadow in the picture, nothing like what I saw with my own eyes. The gray didn't show up. It just looked darker, like the grass had been matted down. A few nights later, I woke up to this buzzing sound. Not loud, but constant, like static or distant power lines. I figured maybe something was wrong with the barn's breaker panel, so I went out with a flashlight. The sound wasn't coming from the barn, it was coming from the pasture. I followed it all the way to the ridge. As soon as I crested the little hill, the sound stopped, just gone. Not faded, not distant, like someone flipped a switch. That square was glowing, not bright, just a faint pale shimmer like moonlight on frost. It wasn't casting light on anything around it, no shadows, no reflection, but the grass itself was giving off this weird, soft glow, almost white blue. I stood there maybe 50 feet away off, just staring at it. I didn't go closer. I don't know why exactly. It wasn't fear, not like being scared of a bear or something. More like pressure, like I wasn't supposed to. After a few minutes, the glow faded and the buzzing came back for just a second, then cut out again. I walked back to the house without turning around once. The next morning, I found the fence near that side was down. 3 posts snapped clean near the base, like something had pushed straight through without slowing down. No tire tracks, no footprints, nothing. The cows were still at the far end, all bunched together and wide-eyed. One of them had cut its side open somehow, long, shallow scrape like it had tried to get away from something fast. I called the vet and she patched her up, said it didn't look like a fence injury. Too clean, too smooth. After that, I put up some temporary electric wire around the square, just a couple strands on stakes. Not to keep anything out really, but more to mark the boundary. I didn't want to forget where it started. About a week later, I noticed something new. In the center of the square, the grass had started to lay flat. Not crushed or trampled, just folded. In a spiral, clockwise, tight at the center and widening as it went out. Perfectly even. You'd think someone used a rake and a compass. It didn't happen gradually, it wasn't there in the morning, but by late afternoon it was fully formed. I didn't touch it. That night, I sat up late on the porch, keeping watch. Around 2:30, the buzzing started again. This time, it was louder. Still not painful, but steady and low, like it was vibrating under the ground. I stayed where I was, looking out over the field. No lights, no shapes, just that sound. Then the porch light flickered. Once, then again, then went out completely. Same with the floodlight over the barn. Everything went dead quiet, except the buzzing. I waited. 10, maybe 15 minutes. Then everything came back on at once. Lights, fridge hum, even the ceiling fan inside. I walked out to the edge of the field and looked toward the square. Couldn't see anything from there, but I felt it. Same pressure, like the air was heavier around it. The next day, the spiral was gone. Grass was still gray, still brittle, but the pattern had vanished, replaced by something else, a grid. Not drawn in the dirt, laid into the grass itself. Square sections, each maybe 2 feet wide, arranged perfectly across the entire area. Like a chessboard, only every square was the same gray color. The only difference was texture. Some were laid flat, others stood straight up, alternating. It made my head hurt to look at it. I gave up trying to make sense of it. I just kept walking the fence, keeping the animals away, watching. After about 3 weeks, it started to fade. The color came back first, slowly like water soaking through paper, then the texture softened. Grass stopped snapping under my boots. Bugs came back. I saw a bird land near the edge and not freak out. The dogs stopped growling when we got close. One morning I walked right up to it and it was just grass again. Still a little paler than the rest of the field, but alive. No spiral, no grid, no glow. It never spread. Never came back. But every now and then, when I walk the fence early in the morning, I get this metallic taste in my mouth near that spot, like I bit a piece of tinfoil. It goes away after a few seconds. No sound, no lights, just that weird taste. I don't graze the animals there anymore. I let the grass grow tall, let the wind push it around like normal. Nothing strange has happened since, but I keep the temporary fence up, just in case. It was a cargo run. Nothing exciting. Middle of October, clear skies, night flight from Phoenix to Spokane. I'd done that route maybe a dozen times over the years. I flew solo, small twin prop, low altitude, not down in the weeds or anything, but not up with the big boys either. Usually quiet, routine stuff. Just me, the hum of the engines, and radio chatter on the background frequency. I was cruising at 11,000 feet, maybe halfway through Nevada, somewhere near Ely, I think. No weather on radar, no turbulence, just smooth sailing, clear visibility, stars out. I had the autopilot set and was sipping lukewarm coffee from a metal thermos that always tasted faintly like jet fuel, no matter how well I cleaned it. Then I saw it. Off my left wing, maybe a mile out. At first, I thought it was just another aircraft. Looked like steady running lights. White and red, gliding along, same direction, same speed. It didn't approach or fall back, just sort of matched my trajectory. That wasn't unheard of. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of commercial flights at a distance, especially around busier corridors. But this one felt off. For one, it wasn't on the radio. I keep a separate receiver scanning for nearby aircraft, and there'd been nothing. No call-ins, no altitude announcements, no chatter. That bugged me. Second, it wasn't on ADS-B. That's basically real-time tracking. If anything with a transponder is out there, it should ping on my tablet. This thing didn't. No signal, no ID, no altitude readout, just blank space. I kept watching it, trying to convince myself it was probably military. There's bases scattered all over the desert out there, maybe a test flight, maybe just something with transponder off for whatever reason. But it didn't look like a military craft. No strobes, no tail light, nothing blinking. Just those two steady points of light, one red, one white. Same brightness, never flickering, never changing. After about 2 minutes of watching, I noticed something else. It wasn't drifting relative to me. When you're both moving at high speed in the same direction, you'll usually get some kind of parallax. One plane shifts slightly compared to the other as flight paths converge or diverge. But this one stayed in exactly the same spot relative to my position. Dead even, like it was tethered to an invisible track. I called it out to ATC just to be safe. Center, this is 4902 Golf. Got visual on unknown traffic 9 o'clock low, about a mile out. No ADS-B. Pause. Then they came back, calm as usual. 4902 Golf, negative traffic in your vicinity. Confirm visual? Affirmative. Constant bearing. Appears to be pacing. No contact on secondary. They gave me another pause, then asked if I wanted to divert. I said no. I still wasn't scared at that point, just confused. Curious. About 5 minutes in, I reached for binoculars I kept tucked near the dash. Took a quick look, expecting to catch some detail. Rotor blur if it was a helo, wings if it was a jet. But I couldn't make out any shape at all. Just those two lights, hanging there, perfectly spaced apart like eyes on a dark face I couldn't see. Then it did something I still don't really understand. It rotated. Not like a bank or turn. It rotated on its axis, 90 degrees. Slow, smooth, deliberate. The lights turned vertical instead of horizontal, one above the other, and the whole thing just sort of stood upright in the sky. Still in place, still matching speed. No trail, no noise, no wobble. That was when my gut flipped a little. Aircraft don't do that. Not anything I've seen. Not helicopters, not VTOLs, not drones. Whatever it was, it turned like gravity didn't apply to it the same way. Just pivoted in place like it was on a gimbal. Then it shot straight up. No acceleration curve, no buildup, just whoosh, gone. Straight vertical, perfectly smooth. From a dead pace beside me to vanishing into the black sky in about a second. No afterglow, no sonic boom, no change in air pressure, just absence. I sat there holding the yoke with one hand, binoculars dangling from the other, heart pounding. My instruments didn't blip, autopilot held, no anomalies, cabin pressure, temperature, heading, all normal. I called ATC again. Traffic departed visual vertically, unknown type, no further contact. They didn't say much, just acknowledged and asked if I needed to file a report. I said I'd note it in post-flight. That was it. The rest of the flight went by without incident. But I kept scanning the sky the whole time. Every light I saw, every glint, every flicker. I tracked it with my eyes until I landed. At the airport, the tower crew was friendly. I didn't bring it up. I wasn't sure how to explain what I'd seen without sounding dramatic. I filled out the basic paperwork, fueled up, and drove to the motel I always crash at outside Spokane. That night, I laid in bed with the TV on mute, just listening to the air conditioner kick on and off. I couldn't stop running it over in my head. The pacing, the silence, the way it rotated, the way it left. I didn't report it to the FAA. I wrote it in my personal flight log under unusual visual, which is what I put for meteor trails or weird cloud formations. That's as far as I went, but I haven't flown that route at night again. Not that I won't, just haven't had reason to. But if I do, I'll be watching the sky a little differently, and I'll keep the binoculars closer. I usually walk my dog Cleo right around sunrise. She's a black lab mix, big, lazy, gentle. We live in a quiet neighborhood outside a small town in Vermont. Not much goes on out here, just trees, hills, and the occasional passing truck. That morning was like any other. I got up at 5:30, made a cup of coffee, and clipped Cleo's leash to her collar. It was late spring, still a little cool before the sun came up, but the air smelled clean. Birds were already chirping like crazy, loud enough that I noticed it before I even stepped outside. We always take the same route, down our long gravel driveway, across the road, and onto a narrow dirt trail that cuts through a stretch of woods. It's not part of any park, just a path worn down by hunters and people walking their dogs. It loops around and brings us back near the road after about half a mile. We were maybe 10 minutes in when I noticed something felt wrong. The trail dips down into this little hollow with tall pines on both sides, and it always gets a little darker and cooler there. But this time it felt too quiet. That was the first thing, the silence. No birds, no wind, no bugs. It was like someone had hit mute on the world. The leaves weren't even rustling, and it wasn't just still. It was dead still. Cleo stopped walking. She didn't just pause to sniff something. She froze completely, like a statue. Tail down, ears pinned back. Then she looked up. I tried to tug her forward a little, but she wouldn't budge. She just stood there, staring straight above us into the sky like she was waiting for something to happen. I crouched next to her and rubbed behind her ear, but she didn't react. That's when I noticed she was trembling, full body shaking like she does during thunderstorms. I looked up too. There was nothing there, just a gray-blue sky, no clouds. I kept glancing around, thinking maybe it was a hawk or something, but there was nothing. No sound, no movement. And then I realized I could hear my own heartbeat. It was that quiet. I started to feel lightheaded, like when you stand up too fast. There was this pressure behind my eyes, like I'd gone up a mountain. I blinked a few times, trying to clear it, but it didn't go away. Then I saw it. Not directly above us. Off to the right, past the trees. Just barely visible between two branches. It looked like a disc or a dome. I couldn't tell how far it was or how big, but it wasn't moving. It was just there, hanging in the sky, completely still. The color was strange, kind of silvery, but dull. Like brushed metal, not shiny. It didn't reflect light, and there was no glow or anything like that. Just this perfectly smooth shape floating in the sky, maybe 100 feet up. I didn't hear anything. Not a hum, not a buzz, nothing. Cleo wouldn't stop shaking. I picked her up. She's too big for that, but I did it anyway, and started walking back toward the road. I don't even remember making the decision. I just needed to not be there. As I walked, I glanced back once, and it was still there. Same position, same shape, just suspended in the sky like a balloon that had stopped midair. When I got closer to the road, I noticed the birds started up again, like flipping a switch. First one, then a few more, and then suddenly it was back to full volume. I put Cleo down, and she bolted the rest of the way to the house. I didn't even have to call her. Once we were inside, I locked the door behind me. I don't know why. It wasn't like I thought it was going to come through the door, but it felt necessary. Cleo went straight to the corner behind the couch and curled up there, still shaking. I sat at the kitchen table with my coffee and realized my hands were trembling too. I went outside later that afternoon just to see. I walked back to the trail with Cleo, but she wouldn't go past the edge of the woods. Not even a step. Her ears were down, and she kept looking up like she expected something to be there. I stood in the same spot where we'd stopped that morning, looking up through the trees. Nothing. Just open sky. The birds were chirping, wind blowing through the branches like normal. But something had changed. The air still felt a little off, like static. And I swear the pine needles on the ground looked disturbed, like they'd been pushed outward in a circle. Could have been anything, I guess. A deer, maybe. I didn't check too closely. I haven't seen it again. I've walked the trail since then, during the day, always with someone else. But Cleo still won't go near it. I've tried treats, toys, everything. She won't step past that first bend in the path. She plants her feet and stares up, every time. I was sitting on a fallen log just past dusk, waiting for a deer to show up near the ridgeline. The air was crisp, the kind that stings your lungs a little when you breathe it in. I'd been out there for a couple of hours already, hoping to catch something before night fully took over. That's when I noticed it. A shadow against the darkening sky that didn't belong. It was shaped like a big letter V, kind of like a flock of geese in formation, but there was no sound. None. Usually if something that big was flying that low, you'd hear it, even if it was distant. But this thing just drifted across the sky, smooth and silent. I blinked, thinking maybe it was a trick of the light or some flock of birds too far away to hear. I'm a vet, spent time overseas, seen a fair bit of strange. Not the alien stuff, just the weird little things that don't add up. This was different. The craft moved slower than any balloon I've ever seen, but faster than a glider or any slow plane. It wasn't hovering, more like gliding, but it rotated very slightly as it moved, like it was scanning or adjusting itself. I remember watching the tips of the V tilt just a fraction every few seconds. I pulled my binoculars out of my pack and focused on it. No lights, no markings, just this dull, matte surface that absorbed what little light there was. It was bigger than anything local aircraft I know, easily twice the wingspan of a small plane. But it didn't look like anything I've ever seen in any air show or military base. The sky around it was quiet. No birds flew near it, no insects buzzing around. It just passed slowly, and I kept my eyes glued until it disappeared behind the ridge. After it was gone, the forest felt different, heavier somehow. Like the usual nighttime sounds, the rustling of leaves, distant owl calls, the hum of bugs, were muted or missing entirely. I checked my watch. About 15 minutes had passed since I first saw the thing. I figured maybe I was imagining things, but the whole setup felt wrong. I packed up slowly, deciding to head back to camp. I kept glancing over my shoulder, like I thought it might come back or someone might be watching. My dog Max was quiet, which was weird. He usually barks at any odd noise, but he just sat close to me, ears twitching. On the walk back, I noticed something strange. The trail markers I'd put up on the way in, little pieces of tape on branches, were gone. Not fallen, not torn down by wind, just missing. I've been hunting this area for years and never had anything like that happen. I stopped and looked around for a good while, but didn't find a single one. I reached the campfire spot where I'd left my gear. Everything was exactly where I'd left it. The fire pit was cold, which made sense, but there was a faint smell, kind of like ozone mixed with something metallic. I couldn't figure out where it was coming from, and Max kept sniffing the ground, moving in tight circles like he was trying to track something invisible. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe I'd been spooked by the light and my imagination was filling in the gaps. Still, I didn't sleep well that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that V shape drifting across the sky, slow and silent, tilting like it was watching. The next morning, I found a spot on my arm, a small circular mark, pale red like a bug bite, but oddly shaped. I checked Max, but he didn't have anything unusual. I didn't think much of it at first, maybe a spider or a tick, but the mark didn't itch or hurt. It just sat there, like it didn't belong. When I got home a few days later, I checked the local news, thinking maybe someone else had seen something weird. There were a few reports of strange lights in the area that night, but nothing concrete. No aircraft sightings, no weather balloons, nothing official. I tried to tell a couple of friends, but they just laughed it off. Probably a drone, someone said. But I know what I saw. It wasn't a drone. Too big, too slow, too quiet. And the way it moved, that rotation, it wasn't anything I've seen before. Sometimes when I'm outside at night, I'll catch a glimpse of a shadow moving overhead. No sound, no lights, just a shape, drifting. I don't know if it's the same thing, but it feels like that V still out there watching. I haven't gone back to that ridge since. Too many questions, not enough answers. I was about 3 miles up on the Pine Ridge Loop when it happened. Early fall, late September. It was one of those hikes I'd planned last minute, just trying to squeeze in something after work before the days got too short. I got to the trailhead later than I meant to, around 5:30, so I knew I'd be racing sunset a bit, but I had a headlamp in my pack and figured I'd turn around halfway if I lost light. The first couple miles were normal. Trail was dry, air was cool. It had that early autumn quiet to it. No bugs, not much wind, just the sound of my boots and the occasional squirrel bolting across the trail. I only passed one other person, a guy heading back toward the lot with earbuds in. We nodded and kept moving. By the time I reached the ridgeline, the sun was starting to dip below the far side of the valley. I stopped at the top to take a break. There's this flat rock outcrop that looks west across the trees and the hills beyond, and I've sat there before during longer hikes. It's a peaceful spot. Usually you can see a few birds circling or a deer trail down below. That evening, though, there wasn't much of anything, just stillness. That's when I saw it. At first I thought it was a drone. It was hovering maybe 150 feet above the ridge on the opposite side of the valley, not moving, just sitting there, reflective, not fleck bright or flashing, just catching the light in this weird, dull way, like the way metal looks underwater. The shape was hard to make out. It wasn't round exactly, and it wasn't sharp-edged either. Kind of like a stretched-out drop, almost. It didn't wobble or shift like most drones do when they're holding position. It was perfectly still. I stood there for a few seconds just watching it. The longer I looked, the more off it seemed. There was no noise. Nothing. And it wasn't catching the sunset the way everything else was. The sky behind it had gone all orange and pink, and this thing stayed flat gray, like it didn't reflect color. I pulled out my phone. I didn't think much of it at first. Just figured I'd zoom in, take a video, maybe figure out what kind of drone it was. But the second I lifted the phone and pointed the camera, the screen wouldn't focus. Everything went blurry. Not just the object, everything. Like the autofocus was stuck in the wrong depth and couldn't correct. I tapped the screen. Nothing. Switched to photo mode, then back to video. Same thing. I tried to zoom. The image jumped a little, then froze. My phone just locked up for a second. I lowered it to look at the screen, and that's when I saw the battery indicator drop, like physically drop, straight from 89% to 0%. It didn't fade. It didn't say low battery or give a warning, just 89 to black. The screen went dead. I stood there with the phone in my hand, totally still. I didn't move or say anything for a solid minute, just stared across the ridge. The object was still there, exactly where it had been, but now it felt different. I don't know how to explain it. Before it was just odd. Now it felt like it was aware of me. I know how that sounds. I backed away from the outcrop slowly. I didn't run. I didn't even turn my back on it at first. I just moved downhill a few steps at a time, keeping it in sight until I was far enough into the trees that the ridge blocked my view. The forest felt wrong. Not loud, not quiet, just wrong. No birds, no wind. Just my footsteps and this faint, high-pitched ringing in my ears. I stopped and took my pack off, thinking maybe my headlamp or my phone charger had turned on and was making the sound, but everything was off. I pressed the phone's power button. No response. I started moving fast. The trail back to the parking lot wasn't long, but it felt longer. I kept checking over my shoulder, even though I didn't see anything. It was just this weight in the air, like something behind me, even I was alone. I passed a wooden signpost about a mile from the trailhead, the one that says Trail 4A and has a little arrow carved into it. And that's when I noticed the ringing stop. Not fade, just stop. The moment it did, every hair on my arm stood up. I kept going. Didn't stop again. I reached the parking lot just after the last light disappeared from the sky. Mine was the only car left. I got in, locked the doors, and just sat there for a second with the engine off, staring into the trees. My phone was still dead. I didn't turn on music. I didn't check the rear view. I drove home in silence, gripping the wheel too tight the whole way. The weirdest part came the next morning. I plugged in my phone overnight. It turned on like normal. Battery showed 82% when I woke up. I checked my photos and videos. Nothing from that hike, not even the stuff I took earlier on the trail. My entire camera roll from that day was gone. And the timestamp for the last file saved? 4:17 p.m., over an hour before I reached the ridge.